Hey guys, tonight we're traveling to Yakutia, Russia, specifically to the village of Oymyakon, where the thermometer doesn't just drop below zero, it plummets to temperatures that make Antarctica look like a beach vacation. Picture this, you step outside and your first breath, that simple, automatic thing you've done millions of times, freezes solid in your nostrils. The moisture in your eyes begins to crystallize. Your eyelashes accumulate frost with each blink. Within 60 seconds of exposure, frostbite starts creeping across any bare skin. This is a place where minus 71 degrees Celsius, minus 96 degrees Fahrenheit isn't just a record. It's a very real possibility every winter. You probably won't survive this if you make even one careless mistake. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Are you in sunny California at midnight? Rainy London at 5 a.m.? I always love seeing how far these stories travel while you're drifting off. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in Oymyakon, population roughly 500, and you've just arrived from anywhere that has normal weather. Let's say you flew into Yakutsk, the regional capital and coldest city on Earth, then drove 14 hours along the Road of Bones, so named because it was built by Gulag prisoners whose remains literally paved the way. Cheerful stuff. The landscape stretches endlessly white in every direction, broken only by the occasional stunted larch tree that's somehow clinging to life in permafrost that goes down 1,500 meters. That's almost a mile of frozen ground beneath your feet that hasn't thawed since the Pleistocene epoch. The moment you arrived, probably in late November when winter truly locks in, you notice something immediately wrong with your face. Your breath doesn't just fog, it crackles. Locals call this sound the whisper of the stars, which is poetic until you realize it's the sound of your exhaled moisture flash freezing into ice crystals that tinkle as they fall. Your guide, a weathered Yakut man named Mikhail who finds your thermal expedition gear adorably inadequate, explains that this only happens below minus 50 degrees Celsius. When you hear the stars whisper, he says with the hint of a smile, you know you're in the real Yakutia. Your exposed cheeks begin to ache within seconds. A deep, bone-penetrating cold that feels less like temperature and more like your face is being pressed against a frozen metal beam, which, in terms of thermal conductivity and heat loss, isn't far from the truth. The human body radiates heat at a rate that's manageable in most climates, but at these temperatures, you're essentially a walking furnace trying to heat the entire Siberian wilderness. You lose heat 30 times faster than in normal winter weather. 30 times. Your body is screaming internally, redirecting blood away from your extremities, sacrificing your fingers and toes to keep your core organs alive. Mikhail watches you with the patient amusement of someone who's seen countless outsiders experience this exact moment of realization. You understand now, he says in accented English, why we have saying, cold is not the worst thing. The worst thing is not respecting the cold. He adjusts his fur hat, a traditional ashanka made from actual reindeer hide, not the synthetic nonsense you bought on Amazon, and gestures toward the village. Come. We get you inside before you lose something you want to keep. The village itself looks like it was designed by someone who took brutalist architecture as a personal challenge. Squat, sturdy buildings painted in faded blues and greens sit close to the ground, as if trying to hide from the wind. Smoke rises from every chimney in thick, white columns that freeze into ice fog about 10 meters up, creating a permanent cloud layer that hangs over the settlement. In summer, and yes, there is a summer here, albeit a brief and somewhat sarcastic one, temperatures can reach 30 degrees Celsius, 86 degrees Fahrenheit. The annual temperature swing in Yakutia is over 100 degrees Celsius, the most extreme on Earth. Your local weather's seasonal difference has nothing on this place. You notice there are no pipes above ground. Everything, water, sewage, heating, runs through insulated channels buried deep in the permafrost or elevated on stilts with careful insulation. Because at these temperatures, exposed plumbing doesn't freeze gradually. It freezes explosively. Water expands when it freezes, and in these conditions, that expansion happens so rapidly that pipes burst like small bombs. Historians still argue whether the Soviet engineers who designed Oymykon's infrastructure in the 1920s and 30s were geniuses or madmen. Probably both. They built a town where none should exist, in conditions that actively try to kill human habitation every single day. Your accommodation for this experiment in voluntary suffering is a traditional Yakut house, though it's been upgraded with some modern amenities like electric heating and, praise whatever deity you prefer, indoor plumbing. The outer door opens into what's called a cold vestibule, essentially an airlock that prevents the interior heat from escaping every time someone enters or leaves. This isn't a luxury, it's a survival feature. Mikhail explains that opening a door directly to the outside would drop the indoor temperature by 10 to 15 degrees Celsius instantly. And in a place where maintaining warmth is the difference between life and death, that's unacceptable. Inside, the walls are thick, absurdly thick by normal standards. You're looking at roughly 1 meter of insulation between you and the homicidal cold outside. The windows are triple paned with a gap of at least 15 centimeters between each layer, and even then, they're the weakest point in the thermal envelope. Ice forms on the inside of the windows in elaborate fractal patterns, beautiful and vaguely threatening. The indoor temperature hovers around 20 degrees Celsius, 68 degrees Fahrenheit, which means there's a temperature differential of over 90 degrees Celsius between inside and outside. That's like living inside a thermos flask, except the consequences of the thermos breaking are considerably more fatal. Your host family, Mikhail, his wife Serdana, and their 2 children who eye you with the curious fascination usually reserved for exotic zoo animals, are gathered around a massive brick stove called a burzwika that occupies nearly a quarter of the main room. This stove is the heart of the home, literally. It burns constantly from October through April, fed with coal and wood that's stockpiled each summer in quantities that would supply a normal household for years. The family has already burned through about 2 tons of fuel this winter, and it's only January. Serdana offers you tea, which you accept gratefully, your hands still aching from the brief walk from the car. The tea is served in a traditional Yakut style, black and scalding hot, because lukewarm beverages are a luxury of temperate climates. Everything here is temperature optimized for survival. The tea warms you from the inside, and you can actually feel your core temperature stabilizing. The frantic alarm bells your hypothalamus has been ringing, finally quieting to a dull concern. You sleep here, Mikhail says, gesturing to a small room off the main living area. Near stove. First night, you will need it. The bedroom is tiny, barely large enough for a narrow bed piled with furs and blankets that must weigh 20 kilos combined. There's no heating vent in this room. The warmth radiates through the wall from the main stove. The window, yes, there's a window in the bedroom because even in Yakutia people like natural light is completely frosted over. You can't see outside. The ice on the inside of the glass is nearly a centimeter thick. As you prepare for your first night's sleep in this place, Serdana explains the evening routine with the seriousness of someone briefing you on emergency procedures. Check the stove at midnight, she says. Make sure fire is still strong. Check again at 4 in the morning. If fire dies and you sleep through, morning will be very bad. She's not being dramatic. If the heating system fails overnight and the house temperature drops to match the outside, you could literally freeze to death in your bed. The house itself could suffer structural damage from the rapid temperature change. This isn't like forgetting to turn on your heater at home. This is a life or death responsibility that every resident of Oymyakon performs every single night for 7 months of the year. You lie down on the bed, the weight of the furs creating a cocoon of warmth that's almost oppressive after the penetrating cold outside. Your body is confused, oscillating between the memory of freezing and the current state of almost too warm. Outside, the temperature is still dropping. Right now it's hovering around minus 65 degrees Celsius, minus 85 degrees Fahrenheit, and the forecast, delivered via satellite internet because yes, even here they have Wi-Fi though it's spotty, suggests it might hit minus 70 degrees Celsius by morning. The wind is picking up. You can hear it whistling around the corners of the house. A high, thin sound that's distinctly different from normal wind. This is wind moving through air so cold and dense it behaves differently, carrying ice crystals that sandblast anything in their path. The locals call extreme cold with wind black frost, because exposed skin turns black with frostbite within seconds. Not minutes, seconds. Your mind drifts as you lie there, processing the surreal reality of where you are. This village exists in conditions that should be uninhabitable. The temperature here is colder than the surface of Mars on an average day. It's colder than the coldest temperature ever recorded in Antarctica's populated research stations. This is a place where car batteries freeze solid, where steel becomes brittle and shatters like glass, where spit freezes before it hits the ground. Yes, you tested that, and yes, it made a very satisfying crackling sound. Yet 500 people live here. They raise children here. They go to work, attend school, celebrate birthdays and weddings. Life continues in spite of conditions that seem designed to prevent life entirely. The indigenous Yakut people have lived in this region for over 1,000 years, developing an intricate culture perfectly adapted to extreme cold. They breed horses, yes, horses, that can survive outside year-round in temperatures that would kill Arabian horses in hours. These Yakut horses develop winter coats so thick they look like small, hairy tanks, and they've learned to paw through meter-deep snow to find frozen grass beneath. You think about the fact that you'll need to wake up in a few hours to check the stove. That this isn't a one-time thing, but a routine that will govern your entire winter here. That falling asleep in Oymyakon always carries a small, quiet question mark. Will the heating hold? Will you wake up? It's not paranoia. It's realistic risk assessment. People have frozen to death in their homes here when heating systems failed. It's rare, but it happens. Complacency is dangerous. The darkness outside is absolute. In January, this far north, the sun makes only a brief, token appearance around midday, hovering just above the horizon for a few hours before giving up entirely. Right now, at 10 p.m., it's been dark for 9 hours and won't be light for another 12. The darkness and the cold are co-conspirators, working together to press down on human existence, testing it, probing for weaknesses. Your first midnight stove check will come soon. You set an alarm on your phone, which you've kept close to your body because batteries die instantly in extreme cold, and try to let yourself drift towards sleep, wrapped in reindeer furs, in a house that's essentially a habitable igloo, in the coldest permanently inhabited place on Earth. Welcome to Yakutia. Try not to freeze. You spend the next hour in that strange liminal space between waking and sleeping, hyper-aware of every sound. The house itself is talking, groaning and creaking as different materials contract at different rates in the cold. Wood, metal, concrete. They all respond differently to minus 65 degrees Celsius temperatures, and the symphony they create is both alien and oddly soothing. It's like sleeping inside a living creature, one that's constantly adjusting and adapting to survive. Around 11 p.m., you hear Mikhail moving through the house, his footsteps soft and practiced. He's checking the stove, adding fuel, ensuring the fire stays strong enough to carry the household through the night. This is the rhythm of life here. Constant vigilance, constant maintenance, constant respect for the cold that's always waiting just beyond the walls. It's not dissimilar to living on a boat in the middle of the ocean, except the ocean is frozen air that wants to crystallize your lungs. Your breathing has adjusted to the dry air. Yakutia is technically a polar desert, receiving less precipitation annually than the Sahara. The air inside is warm but desperately dry, and you can feel it parching your throat and nasal passages. Sardana left a pot of water simmering on the edge of the stove to add some humidity to the air, but it's fighting a losing battle. You'll wake up with your mouth feeling like it's been stuffed with cotton. Your lips cracked despite the moisturizer you applied liberally before bed. Outside, a dog barks, one of the village's hardy Yakut huskies, bred for conditions like this. These dogs can sleep outside in temperatures that would kill most other breeds, curling into tight balls with their thick, fluffy tails covering their noses. They're one of the few animals that seem genuinely built for this climate, along with those impossible horses and the ravens that somehow survive year-round by scavenging and adapting their behavior to the extreme cold. You drift deeper, your consciousness fragmenting into that peculiar pre-sleep state where thoughts become non-linear and dreamlike. You think about the fact that tomorrow you'll need to learn how to function in this environment. How to dress properly. The locals wear layers upon layers, with the innermost being thin wool, then thicker wool, then fur, with everything designed to trap warm air without causing sweat, because sweat in Yakutia is a death sentence. Moisture plus extreme cold equals hypothermia speedrun. Your last conscious thought before finally slipping into actual sleep is wonderment at human adaptability. That people not only survive here but thrive, that children laugh and play, that teenagers complain about school and scroll through social media just like teens everywhere, except they do it while casually existing in temperatures that would hospitalize most of Earth's population within minutes. The cold presses against the walls. The fire burns. The stars whisper outside. And you sleep, trusting in walls, fuel, and the ancient knowledge of a people who learned long ago how to survive where survival should be impossible. You wake at midnight to your phone's alarm. Though wake is a generous term for the groggy half-consciousness you achieve. Your body feels like it's been wrapped in warm concrete, reluctant to move from the nest of furs and blankets that have created a perfect microclimate around you. But this isn't optional. You extract yourself from the cocoon, immediately feeling the temperature differential. The room is noticeably cooler than when you went to sleep, maybe 15 degrees Celsius instead of the 20 degrees Celsius you remember. That 5-degree drop happened in just 2 hours, which tells you everything you need to know about the relentless cold seeping through every microscopic gap in the structure. Mikhail is already at the stove when you stumble into the main room, moving with the efficiency of someone who's performed this ritual 10,000 times. He's adding coal to the fire, adjusting the damper, reading the flames like you might read a text message. "Good, you wake up," he says without looking at you. Many visitors sleep through first alarm. Then they learn the hard way. He doesn't elaborate on what the hard way entails, but you can imagine. Nothing good comes from learning things the hard way at minus 70 degrees Celsius. The stove is a masterpiece of thermal engineering that predates modern understanding of thermodynamics. Built from firebrick, a special refractory clay that can withstand extreme temperature fluctuations. It's designed to absorb heat during burning and radiate it slowly over hours. The walls of the stove are nearly 20 centimeters thick, acting as a massive thermal battery. When properly maintained, a well-built Burzwika can keep a house warm for 6 to 8 hours on a single loading of fuel. But properly maintained is doing a lot of work in that sentence. It requires understanding fuel density, airflow, ember management, and a dozen other variables that Mikhail has internalized through a lifetime of practice. In Soviet times, Mikhail says, feeding another chunk of coal into the firebox, they try to modernize everything, bring in oil furnaces, electric heaters. Modern solutions for modern problems, yes. He shakes his head, closing the stove door with a practiced motion. Half of them fail. In Yakutia, old ways exist because they work. These stoves, our grandfathers built them. They will outlive your grandchildren. It's not bragging. It's simply fact. You're looking at technology that's been refined over centuries specifically for these conditions, and it works better than most modern alternatives. You help him stack additional fuel near the stove, both coal and wood. The coal is stored in large chunks that need to be broken down, and you watch as Mikhail demonstrates the proper technique. Not too small, he instructs. Small pieces burn too fast. Not too large, they don't catch well. Like this. He splits a piece into rough thirds with a small axe, creating chunks about the size of your fist. You will do this tomorrow. For now, watch and learn. The next 4 hours pass in a blur of restless half-sleep. Your phone alarm drills into your consciousness again at 4 a.m., and this time the room temperature has dropped to maybe 12 degrees Celsius. Still survivable, but the trend is concerning. You're starting to understand the math of survival here. Heat dissipation is constant and relentless, while heat generation requires active, ongoing effort. Stop generating heat for too long and the cold wins. It's that simple and that brutal. By the time pale gray light begins filtering through the frosted windows around 10 a.m., and calling it light is generous. It's more like slightly less dark. You've been awake in shifts all night, and you feel like you've run a marathon. Sardana is already up, moving through the house with quiet competence, checking window seals, examining the walls near the foundation where cold air might penetrate. She spots you watching and explains, "Every morning, we check. Cold finds ways in. Small crack today, big problem tomorrow." She's not exaggerating. At these temperatures, the expansion and contraction of building materials is extreme. A hairline crack can widen dramatically overnight, creating a thermal bridge where cold air pours in like water through a broken dam. You follow her on her inspection route, learning to spot the telltale signs. Frost accumulation in unusual spots, temperature variations in the floor, the subtle sound of air whistling through a gap. This is a daily ritual as essential as brushing your teeth, except the consequences of skipping it are considerably more severe than cavities. The house itself is a marvel of adaptation. The foundation doesn't sit directly on the permafrost. That would be catastrophic. Instead, it's built on wooden pillars driven deep into the frozen ground, with about a meter of airspace beneath the floor. Heat from house would melt permafrost, Mikhail explains over breakfast. A hearty meal of fried fish, dark bread, and that ever-present black tea. Melt permafrost, house sinks, walls crack, everything destroyed. So we build on stilts, let cold air flow underneath. Keep permafrost frozen. The irony isn't lost on you. They have to work to keep the ground frozen to maintain structural integrity, while simultaneously working to keep the interior warm enough for human survival. The walls are an engineering thesis written in wood, insulation, and bitter experience. From the outside in, you're looking at wooden exterior siding, a vapor barrier, 20 centimeters of sawdust insulation, chosen because it's cheap, effective, and available locally. Another vapor barrier, a 20-centimeter air gap, more insulation, this time mineral wool, likely added during a Soviet-era modernization, another barrier, and finally the interior wooden walls. The total thickness is just over a meter, creating what's essentially a fortress against cold. And yet, despite all this, you can still feel the cold pressing in, patient and inexorable. The windows are the weak point, and everyone knows it. Triple-paned with gaps, as you noted before, but even that isn't enough. Sardana shows you their winter routine. Every evening, they hang thick felt curtains over every window, adding another layer of insulation. In the coldest months, they sometimes add plastic sheeting over the curtains, creating a fourth barrier. We could block windows completely, she says, but then we go crazy from darkness. Need some light, even small amount. Historians still argue whether the high rates of depression in Arctic communities are primarily due to the darkness, the isolation, or the constant low-level stress of survival. Probably all three, working in unpleasant harmony. You venture outside mid-morning for your first full experience of Oymyakon in daylight, or what passes for it. The preparation process takes 15 minutes. First, base layer, thin merino wool against your skin. Second layer, thicker wool. Third layer, fleece. Fourth layer, down-filled jacket. Legs, wool long underwear, then fleece-lined pants, then insulated outer pants. Feet, thin wool socks, thick wool socks, felt liners, and then the Valenki, traditional Russian felt boots that are essentially the only footwear that works reliably at these temperatures. Hands, thin glove liners, thick mittens, not gloves. Mittens keep your fingers together, sharing warmth, and outer mittens. Head, balaclava covering everything but your eyes, then the fur hat with ear flaps, secured tightly. Fully dressed, you look like a human-shaped pile of laundry. You can barely move your arms. You've gained approximately 15 kilos of clothing. And according to Mikhail, who's watching your preparation with the critical eye of an expert, you're adequately dressed for brief exposure. Brief. You're planning to be outside for maybe 10 minutes. The cold, when you step into it, is a physical assault. Even through all your layers, even breathing through the balaclava, it's shocking. The air feels thick, almost liquid, and breathing requires conscious effort. Each inhale burns the inside of your nose. Each exhale creates an instant fog that freezes into your balaclava, which will become a solid mass of ice within minutes. Your eyelashes start accumulating frost immediately. Blinking becomes a conscious act because there's a real possibility your eyelids could freeze together if you're not careful. The village in daytime looks like a film set for a post-apocalyptic Ice Age movie. Smoke rises from every chimney, creating that permanent ice fog ceiling that reduces visibility to maybe 100 meters. Everything is coated in frost. Buildings, vehicles, the few brave trees, even the power lines overhead, which are wrapped in thick layers of ice that make them look like white ropes hanging against the gray sky. The only colors are various shades of white, gray, and the occasional faded paint of a building that stubbornly insists on being blue or green under its frost coating. There are a few people out, Necessity demands it, even in these conditions. An elderly woman is collecting water from the village's central water point, a heated structure that keeps water in liquid form. She works quickly and efficiently, filling large containers that she'll lug back to her home. There's no casual chatting, no lingering. Everyone moves with purpose because every second outside is a second of heat loss. You exchange nods. Speaking requires exposing your face more, and that's not worth it for pleasantries. A truck rumbles past, moving slowly. The engine sounds different in the cold, the metal complaining with every revolution. The exhaust is a thick white plume that freezes solid almost immediately, falling to the ground like snow. The driver keeps the engine running, of course he does. Turning off an engine at these temperatures is a gamble. Even with block heaters and battery warmers, there's a real chance it won't restart. So vehicles just run, constantly, burning fuel for the entire winter because the alternative is being stranded, and being stranded out here is a death sentence. You notice the power lines again, running from building to building, and Mikhail follows your gaze. Special wire, he explains, voice muffled through his own balaclava. Normal wire becomes brittle in extreme cold. Snaps. So they use aluminum alloy, designed for Arctic conditions. Even so, we lose power sometimes. Why everyone has backup heating. It's layers upon layers of redundancy, because any single point of failure can cascade into catastrophe. After perhaps 8 minutes outside, your toes are starting to hurt despite the Valenki and double socks. It's a deep, aching cold that signals the beginning of frostbite. Mikhail notices your subtle foot stamping, a classic warming technique, and nods toward the house. Enough for first time. You did good. Many visitors last maybe 3 minutes before panic sets in. You're not sure if he's being kind or honest, but you're grateful to head back inside regardless. The re-entry process is almost as elaborate as the exit. You stamp your feet vigorously in the cold vestibule, knocking off the accumulated frost and ice. Your outer layers are covered in white. Not snow, but frozen breath and condensation. You peel off layer after layer, and each one is damp from the temperature differential. This dampness is dangerous. It needs to be dried before tomorrow's outing, or it'll freeze solid and be useless for insulation. Sardana has a drying rack set up near the stove specifically for this purpose, and it's currently festooned with various family members' clothing from yesterday's excursions. Your face, when you finally unwrap the balaclava, is bright red and aching. Not frostbite, not yet, but the precursor. You can feel the blood rushing back to your cheeks as your body realizes you're in a safe temperature again. Your nose is running, which is actually your body's defense mechanism kicking in, producing moisture to protect the nasal passages from the dry, frozen air. You look at yourself in the small mirror near the door and barely recognize the person staring back. Red-faced, frost-rimmed eyebrows, hair staticky and wild from the hat, eyes slightly wild with the adrenaline of survival. Now you understand, Mikhail says, appearing beside you with 2 cups of that omnipresent hot tea. Why house is everything. House is life. Without good house, proper house, thick walls and strong stove, you cannot survive Yakutian winter. Cannot. He hands you the tea, and you wrap your still cold hands around it gratefully. Our ancestors, they learned this. Many die learning. Now we know. We build right, we live. Build wrong, we die. Very simple. That evening, you participate more actively in the stove maintenance ritual, learning the art of coal selection and placement. Mikhail teaches you to read the fire. Blue flames mean efficient burning. Yellow means incomplete combustion and wasted fuel. Red means the fire's dying and needs attention. You learn the sound of a properly drawing chimney, the exact rattle of the damper when it's optimally positioned. These are skills that exist nowhere in your normal life but are absolutely essential here. The house you're learning isn't just shelter. It's a complex life support system that requires constant monitoring and adjustment. Temperature regulation, humidity management, structural integrity, fuel consumption, air quality. Every factor is interconnected, and neglecting any one of them can trigger a cascade of problems. It's like being the sole engineer on a spacecraft, except the spacecraft is made of wood and bricks and has been keeping people alive through conditions that routinely hit -70 degrees Celsius for generations. As you bed down for your second night, you're more aware of the sounds of the house, the rhythm of its breathing. You understand now that you're not just sleeping in a building. You're sleeping in a carefully maintained pocket of survivable temperature surrounded by an environment that's fundamentally hostile to human life. The walls around you represent centuries of accumulated knowledge, of trial and error, of failures that led to frozen bodies and successes that led to you being here, relatively warm and safe. Outside, the temperature is dropping again. The forecast suggests minus 72 degrees Celsius tonight, which would tie the village record. The stars are brilliant in the clear, brutally cold sky. There's zero light pollution and virtually zero moisture in the atmosphere to dim them. They look close enough to touch, these stars that whisper when your breath freezes. And inside your fortress of wood and brick and desperate ingenuity, the fire burns, the walls hold, and you drift towards sleep knowing you'll wake in a few hours to feed the flames again. This is the rhythm. This is survival. This is Yakutia. Your phone alarm shatters the pre-dawn silence at 6 a.m., and the first thing you notice, before you've even opened your eyes, is that your eyelashes are stuck together. Actually stuck. Frost has accumulated on them during the night from your own breath, and now they're glued shut with ice. You carefully work them apart with your fingers, which are poking out from under the mountain of blankets and are instantly painfully cold. The air in the bedroom has dropped to maybe 8 degrees Celsius overnight, despite the stove burning in the next room. That's a 12-degree drop from when you went to bed, which means the outside temperature has plummeted to something truly apocalyptic. You were right about the forecast. When you check your phone, keeping it under the blankets because exposing it to this air would kill the battery in minutes, you see that Oymyakon hit minus 73 degrees Celsius last night. That's minus 99 degrees Fahrenheit for those keeping score in Fahrenheit, which honestly sounds fake, like a number someone made up to scare children. But it's real, and you're living in it, and now you need to get up and function like a normal human being despite existing in temperatures that would shut down most of human civilization within hours. Mikhail is already up, naturally. You're starting to suspect he never actually sleeps, just enters a state of reduced consciousness while remaining alert for stove emergencies. He's preparing breakfast, and the smell of frying fish and bread pulls you from your cocoon despite your body's screaming protests. Record cold last night, he announces cheerfully, as if this is good news rather than terrifying information. Good you survive. He laughs at his own joke, which you're beginning to realize is very dry Yakut humor. Everything is funny when you live somewhere that routinely tries to kill you. The morning routine you're learning is a carefully choreographed survival dance. First, address the stove. Mikhail shows you how to read the overnight burn, examining the ash, checking for unburned coal, assessing whether the fire maintained proper temperature. See this? He points to a section of gray ash. This means good burn, efficient. If ash is black, sticky, means too little air, wasted fuel. If too much white powder, too much air, burned too fast. It's like reading tea leaves, except the consequences of misreading are hypothermia rather than just a bad fortune. Next, check yourself for cold injuries. You examine your fingers and toes in the relative warmth of the main room, looking for the telltale signs of frostbite, white or grayish patches of skin, numbness, unusual firmness. Your toes are okay, just very cold. Your fingers are fine. Your nose, however, has a small white patch on the tip that Sardana spots immediately. First-degree frostbite. She diagnoses with the casual expertise of someone who's seen this 1,000 times. Not serious, but must warm carefully. No hot water, no rubbing. Just gradual warming. She hands you a warm, not hot, cloth to hold against your nose, monitoring the color change as blood flow returns. This is your introduction to a fundamental truth of Yakutian life. Frostbite isn't a rare emergency. It's a routine occurrence that everyone manages constantly throughout winter. It's like getting minor burns while cooking, unpleasant, requiring attention, but not panic-inducing unless it's severe. The locals have developed an almost casual relationship with what would be considered serious medical emergencies in most places. First-degree frostbite? Warm it up and move on. Second degree with blisters? Annoying but manageable. Third degree with tissue death? Okay, now we're getting concerned. The water situation requires explanation, and Sardana walks you through it while your nose thaws. In summer, we fill large tanks, she explains, gesturing to what looks like a 200-liter drum in the corner of the kitchen. Rainwater, melted snow, whatever we can collect. This water we boil and store. For winter. The village does have running water to some buildings, the school, the community center, a few newer homes, but it's unreliable because keeping water liquid at minus 70 degrees Celsius requires constant heating, and heating requires constant electricity, and electricity in Yakutia is expensive and sometimes unavailable. Most households supplement with this stored water and regular trips to the communal water point. Every 2 days, we go with containers, Sardana continues. Fill up, bring back. Very heavy work. You do the math. If a family of 4 uses maybe 40 liters per day for drinking, cooking, and minimal washing, that's 80 liters every 2 days. Water weighs 1 kilogram per liter, so they're hauling 80 kilos of water through minus 70 degrees Celsius temperatures every 48 hours. And you complain about your commute. Then there's the bathroom situation, which you've been politely avoiding thinking about but can no longer ignore. The house does have a toilet, a modern flush toilet even, but it's treated with extreme caution. Never flush too much in extreme cold, Mikhail warns. Pipes can freeze, even with heating. One bad flush, everything blocks. Then we have big problem. The backup system is a traditional outhouse about 10 meters from the main building, which exists in its own special circle of hell. Going to the bathroom outside at minus 73 degrees Celsius is an experience that fundamentally changes your relationship with basic bodily functions. You decide to delay that particular adventure and focus on the next element of the morning routine, preparing to go outside. Today's mission is critical. Mikhail needs to check on his car, which has been running continuously for the past 3 days. Yes, running. The engine has been idling 24/7 because turning it off would be catastrophic. In extreme cold, oil becomes like honey, he explains, miming thick pouring. Engine oil, transmission oil, even diesel fuel starts to gel. Try to start cold engine, maybe crack the block. Metal is too brittle, so we keep running. The environmental implications of this are staggering. Thousands of vehicles across Yakutia, running continuously for months, pumping exhaust into the atmosphere. But the alternative is being stranded without transportation in conditions where stranded equals dead. It's a harsh calculus, but survival math rarely concerns itself with carbon footprints. Though historians still argue whether the Soviet-era planning that created permanent settlements in these extreme regions was wise or a monument to ideological stubbornness that forced people to live in fundamentally uninhabitable places. Getting dressed for outside takes even longer this morning because you're now doing it without Mikhail's supervision, and you're paranoid about getting it wrong. The layering sequence matters. Too many layers and you'll sweat, which is fatal. Too few and you'll freeze. Each layer needs to fit properly without gaps but without restricting movement. You struggle with the Valenki, the felt boots that are somehow both stiff and floppy simultaneously. Your fingers, still slightly numb from yesterday, fumble with the ties on the fur hat. Sardana watches your struggle with patient amusement. You learn, she says. Children here, they dress themselves by age 4, 5. They learn fast because not learning means pain. She adjusts your balaclava, fixing a gap near your neck that would have been a direct channel for cold air to pour down your collar. There. Now you are maybe not going to freeze immediately. Again with the dry humor. You're noticing it's a common coping mechanism. Finding the absurdity and dark comedy in living somewhere so hostile that dressing improperly for 30 seconds can cause permanent injury. Outside, the dawn, such as it is, has arrived. The sun is making its brief appearance, sitting just barely above the horizon and casting everything in shades of pale orange and blue. The light is beautiful and entirely inadequate for warmth. You can see your breath freezing in real time, creating a personal ice cloud that follows you like a ghost. The temperature has warmed to minus 68 degrees Celsius, which the locals consider a pleasant break from last night's extremes. Mikhail's car is a Russian-made UAZ, a boxy 4x4 that looks like it was designed by someone whose only instructions were, make it survive. It's running, exhaust pumping white clouds that freeze and fall like snow. The windows are completely frosted over from the inside despite the heater running full blast. Mikhail scrapes a small viewing port in the ice with a specialized scraper, just enough to see through. Cannot clear all ice, he explains. If we warm windows too much, stress from temperature difference can crack glass. Small viewing hole is enough. He checks the engine temperature gauge, the oil pressure, listens to the sound of the running motor with the focused attention of a doctor listening to a heartbeat. Good, he pronounces finally. Engine is happy. Uses maybe 5 liters of fuel per day just idling, but better than broken engine. The fuel consumption is outrageous by any normal standard. That's over 100 liters per month just to keep the car functional. But again, the math of survival doesn't care about your fuel efficiency ratings. Your next stop is the village school. A 20-minute walk that feels like an Arctic expedition. The school is one of the larger buildings in Oymyakon, built in the Soviet era with typical brutalist confidence. It's constructed on the same stilts-over permafrost principle as the houses, but on a much larger scale. Steam billows from multiple heating vents, and you can feel warmth radiating from the building even from several meters away. This is a building that must maintain survivable temperatures for hundreds of children, and the heating bill must be astronomical. Inside, after going through another cold vestibule, the temperature is maintained at a precisely regulated 22 degrees Celsius. This isn't comfort, this is regulation. Russian law mandates specific temperature ranges for schools, and in Yakutia, they take this seriously because the alternative is literally freezing children. The principal, a stern woman named Natalia Ivanovna, greets you with the suspicious efficiency of someone who's dealt with too many outsiders asking stupid questions about how they can possibly run a school in these conditions. School closes at -52 degrees Celsius. She tells you without preamble. Not before. Students are expected to attend unless temperature is below that threshold. You process this information slowly. School runs in -51 degrees Celsius weather. -51 degrees Celsius. Children walk to school in that. We have protocol, she continues, seeing your expression. Students who live far away, they board here during extreme cold weeks. Others, parents drive them, but they come. Education does not stop for cold. The classrooms are arranged around the central heating system, which is a complex beast of pipes, boilers, and redundant systems that occupies an entire room in the basement. A full-time maintenance worker monitors it continuously during school hours. If heating fails during school day, we have 30 minutes to evacuate all students to heated emergency shelter or to running vehicles, Natalia explains. We practice this drill every month. Every student knows procedure. You observe a class of 7-year-olds having a mathematics lesson. They're dressed in normal indoor clothing, sweaters, long pants, because the temperature inside is comfortable. They could be in a school anywhere in the world, except that outside the frosted windows, the temperature is -68 degrees Celsius, and their very presence here represents a triumph of human stubbornness over environmental reality. The teacher is explaining fractions using slices of frozen fish as visual aids, which is such a perfect Yakutian detail that you almost laugh. During recess, which happens indoors because outdoor recess only happens when temperatures are above -40 degrees Celsius, the children are boisterous and energetic in the way children everywhere are. They're playing a game that seems to involve a lot of running and shouting, burning off energy in the safe warmth of the gymnasium. These kids have never known a life without extreme cold. For them, this is normal. They find it weird that you think it's weird. One bold 10-year-old asks you, "In your country, can you go outside in winter without special clothes?" When you explain that yes, sometimes winter temperatures are around 0 degrees Celsius and you can just wear a coat, she looks at you with something between pity and suspicion, as if you're describing an impossible fantasy world. The school serves another critical function. It's one of the designated emergency shelters for the village. In the event of a catastrophic heating failure in homes during extreme cold, residents are instructed to make their way to the school, which has backup generators, stored fuel, and supplies to shelter the entire village population for up to 2 weeks. This has happened twice in living memory, once during a power outage in 1999, once during a fuel shortage in 2008. Both times, the school became a refugee center for villagers whose homes became uninhabitable, and both times the system worked. No one died, though it was close. Walking back to Mikhail's house, you pass the village's small general store, which is open despite the temperature. Inside, protected by that essential cold vestibule, Shelves hold the standard necessities: canned goods, dried pasta, tea, sugar, flour, and an impressive array of alcohol. The alcohol isn't just for drinking, though there's plenty of that in long Yakutian winters. It's also used for starting fires, disinfecting, and antifreeze applications. The store owner, bundled in layers even inside, nods at you. "You survived so far," he observes. "Good." This seems to be the standard Yakutian greeting for outsiders, acknowledging that you haven't frozen to death yet. Back at the house, the midday routine involves preparing the main meal, traditionally the largest meal of the day, eaten around 2 p.m. after the peak warmth, relatively speaking, has been achieved. Sardana is cooking stroganina, which you'll learn more about later, and venison stew that's been simmering on the stove since morning. The food is heavy, calorie-dense, designed to fuel bodies that are burning energy at remarkable rates just to maintain core temperature. You'll eat more in a day here than you normally eat in 2 days at home, and you'll still lose weight. After lunch, there's a brief period of rest, and then the afternoon chores begin. Collecting more fuel from the outdoor storage, checking the house perimeter for new cracks or gaps, preparing for the evening and the inevitable temperature drop that comes with sunset. You're learning that life in Oymyakon is structured around the cold, with every activity timed and planned around temperature fluctuations and daylight availability. As the abbreviated day darkens, sunset is around 3:30 p.m. this time of year, you help Mikhail bring in the evening's fuel supply. This requires multiple trips from the outdoor storage shed to the house, and each trip is an exercise in speed. Grab fuel, move fast, get inside, warm up, repeat. Your lungs are burning from the cold air despite breathing through the balaclava. Your fingers ache in the mittens, but the fuel pile by the stove grows, and with it, your confidence that you'll survive another night. The evening routine begins early. By 5 p.m., the family is settling in for the long night ahead. The curtains are drawn over the windows, adding that extra layer of insulation. The stove is stoked high, building up heat reserves in the brick mass. The samovar, a traditional Russian tea urn, is filled and heated, ensuring hot tea will be available throughout the night. Everyone's outdoor gear is hung to dry and will be checked before morning for any damage or excessive moisture buildup. You've survived your first full day of Yakutian morning routine. You're exhausted, your face hurts, your fingers and toes have that deep ache that suggests you danced a bit too close to frostbite, but you're alive and warm and fed. Tomorrow you'll do it all again because this isn't an adventure or a challenge. This is just Wednesday. This is normal life in the coldest inhabited place on Earth, where waking up is the easy part and everything that comes after is a carefully choreographed dance with death that's been perfected over generations. By day 3, you're starting to understand the central truth of Yakutian cuisine. Everything is frozen, and that's actually the point. Not frozen as in stored in the freezer, but frozen as in the outside world is a natural deep freeze that makes your refrigerator look tropical. The traditional diet here has evolved over centuries to not just accommodate the extreme cold, but to exploit it as a food preservation and preparation method that simply doesn't exist anywhere else on Earth. Sardana announces it's time to introduce you to stroganina, which you've heard mentioned several times with a reverence usually reserved for religious experiences. "Is the food of Yakutia," she explains, pulling what looks like a solid wooden log from the outdoor storage. Except it's not wood. It's a completely frozen whitefish, rigid as a baseball bat and roughly the same weight. At -70 degrees Celsius, this fish has been frozen so rapidly and so completely that ice crystals haven't had time to form the large structures that destroy cellular walls. It's been essentially cryogenically preserved, and if you could somehow thaw it gently enough, it would theoretically still be fresh. But thawing is not the plan. Sardana sets the frozen fish on a cutting board and begins shaving off paper-thin slices with a very sharp knife, each slice curling slightly as it separates from the frozen mass. The resulting ribbons of fish are translucent, delicate, almost ethereal in their thinness. "You eat frozen," she instructs, arranging the curls on a plate, with salt, pepper, maybe a little oil. Traditional Yakut way. She demonstrates, taking a curl, dipping it in coarse salt, and popping it into her mouth. You follow her lead, and the experience is deeply strange. The frozen fish melts on your tongue, transitioning from solid to liquid almost immediately due to your mouth's warmth. The texture is simultaneously crunchy and creamy, and the flavor is clean, pure, intensely fish-like, but without any of the fishiness that comes from decomposition or improper storage. It's like eating a fish-flavored popsicle, except it's actually quite good. And you understand immediately why this is considered a delicacy. Cannot make stroganina in warm places, Mikhail says, watching you experience this culinary revelation. Need real cold, -40 degrees Celsius minimum, or fish doesn't freeze correctly. Too slow, ice crystals form, ruin texture. This is Yakut specialty, only possible because of our cold. It's a beautiful example of cultural adaptation, taking what could be a disadvantage, everything freezes solid, and transforming it into a unique advantage. We can prepare food in ways literally no one else can. The fish isn't the only thing being stored frozen. Outside, in what's essentially a natural deep freeze that requires zero electricity, you discover Mikhail's winter food storage. An entire reindeer carcass, frozen solid and hanging from a beam. Several frozen geese. A pile of frozen fish that looks like a cord of wood. Containers of frozen berries collected during the brief summer. Even milk frozen into solid blocks that are sawed into chunks and melted as needed. Summer we collect and freeze, Mikhail explains. Winter we eat. Very simple system, very effective. No electricity needed. No fuel for freezer. Nature provides freezing for free. Historians still argue whether the indigenous peoples of Yakutia developed their culture here independently or migrated from elsewhere and adapted. But either way, their food culture represents some of humanity's most impressive cold weather adaptation. They discovered not just how to survive in extreme cold, but how to thrive, creating a cuisine that's specifically designed for an environment where fresh food doesn't exist for 8 months of the year because everything is frozen solid within minutes of exposure. Breakfast is typically frozen fish, thawed slightly over the stove, served with black tea and thick slabs of dark bread. The bread itself is interesting. It's made from rye flour, dense and heavy, designed to provide maximum calories per gram. A single slice probably contains 300 calories, and you'll eat 3 or 4 slices without thinking about it because your body is burning fuel at an incredible rate. You're constantly cold, even inside, even wearing layers, and that constant heat generation requires constant caloric input. Lunch expands the repertoire. Venison or horse meat stew, served over those same dense bread slices with more tea. The stew has been simmering on the edge of the stove for hours, the meat breaking down into tender chunks, the broth thick with fat, precious, calorie-dense fat that your body craves. There's very little in the way of vegetables. Fresh vegetables in Yakutia in winter are either imported at absurd cost or simply don't exist. Sardana shows you her summer garden photos on her phone. Impressive raised beds producing potatoes, carrots, onions, even some tomatoes during the brief, intense summer. But those are distant memories now, preserved as pickles or frozen mash. The horse meat requires some cultural adjustment on your part. Horses in your mind are pets, work animals, not food. But in Yakutia, the Yakut horse is a fundamental part of the survival equation. These remarkable animals, short, stocky, with coats so thick they look almost bear-like, can survive outdoors year-round in temperatures that would kill any other horse breed within hours. They paw through meter-deep snow to find frozen grass beneath, somehow extracting enough nutrition to survive. And yes, they're also food. We eat what survives, Mikhail says simply when he notices your hesitation. Horses survive, so we eat horse. Reindeer survive, we eat reindeer. Cows, pigs, chickens cannot survive Yakutian winter outside. Too expensive to keep warm inside. So we eat what works. It's practical, logical, and completely divorced from the sentimentality that urban food culture allows. This is subsistence food culture, where eating is primarily about survival and only secondarily about pleasure, though the two aren't mutually exclusive. The horse meat in the stew is rich, slightly gamey, darker, and more flavorful than beef. Sardana explains that winter horse meat is especially prized because the animals build up thick fat layers in preparation for winter, and that fat, rendered and stored, is used for everything from cooking to weatherproofing leather to emergency lamp fuel. Nothing is wasted. cannot be wasted when survival margins are this thin. Then there's the milk situation, which borders on the surreal. The local cows, yes, there are some cows, kept in heated barns at great expense, produce milk that's immediately frozen into blocks. Sardana shows you the process. Pour fresh milk into rectangular molds, set outside for literally 30 seconds, bring back inside a solid brick of frozen milk. These bricks are then stored, outside, naturally, and chunks are sawed off as needed, melted over the stove for drinking or cooking. The taste is subtly different from fresh milk. Something about the freezing process concentrates the sugars slightly, but it's perfectly functional and stores indefinitely without refrigeration equipment. Coffee culture has made some inroads in modern Yakutia, but tea, hot, black, strong tea, remains the beverage of choice and necessity. The samovar is kept hot all day, every day, burning through small amounts of coal or wood to maintain a constant supply of boiling water. You drink tea with breakfast, tea mid-morning, tea with lunch, tea mid-afternoon, tea with dinner, tea before bed. You're consuming probably 2 liters of hot tea per day, and it's not optional. It's a critical part of maintaining hydration in the incredibly dry air while also providing warmth from the inside. The tea itself is interesting, typically a strong black variety, often from Georgia or India, bought in bulk because shipping costs to Yakutia are astronomical and you need to stockpile when supplies are available. It's served without milk. Milk is precious and not wasted on beverages, but with generous amounts of sugar. Sugar provides quick energy, which cold-stressed bodies crave. You watch Mikhail stir 3 heaping spoons of sugar into his tea without self-consciousness. And when you do the same, you understand why. The sweetness is comforting, the quick glucose hit perceptible as your body gratefully accepts the easy fuel. Dinner is similar to lunch, more stew, or perhaps roasted frozen fish, or on special occasions, frozen liver sliced thin and pan-fried quickly so it's seared on the outside and still slightly frozen in the middle, which creates a texture that's simultaneously creamy and icy. It's served with pickled vegetables from summer preserves, cucumbers, cabbage, tomatoes, all packed in salt brine that keeps them edible through the winter. These pickles are the only vegetables you'll see for months, and they're treasured for the vitamin C content as much as for the flavor variety they provide. Sardana tells you about scurvy. Yes, scurvy, that disease you thought only affected 18th century sailors, which used to be a real problem in Yakutia during harsh winters when preserved vegetables ran out. My grandmother remembers people getting sick, losing teeth, bleeding gums, she says matter-of-factly. Before Soviet times, before we learned about vitamins, people died from this. Now we know, must preserve summer vegetables, must eat liver for vitamins. Knowledge saves lives. The calories you're consuming are staggering. You estimate you're eating somewhere around 4,000 to 5,000 calories per day, and you're still losing weight. Your body is burning everything you consume just to maintain core temperature, to fuel the constant shivering thermogenesis, to repair the minor cold damage that accumulates daily. The locals, adapted over generations, have metabolisms that are measurably different from people in temperate climates. Higher basal metabolic rates, more efficient fat metabolism, better cold tolerance at the cellular level. There's also alcohol, which needs to be addressed because it's culturally significant and medically complicated. Vodka is ubiquitous, cheap, accessible, and provides quick warmth, or at least the sensation of warmth, which is dangerous because it actually increases heat loss by dilating blood vessels. Mikhail drinks a small glass with dinner most nights, and larger amounts on weekends or special occasions. Alcohol is Yakutian tradition, he acknowledges, but also Yakutian problem. Too many people drink too much, especially in winter darkness. Depression, boredom, cold. Alcohol seems like answer, but makes everything worse. It's a tension that exists throughout Arctic communities. Alcohol provides temporary psychological relief from the grinding hardship of winter, but contributes to accidents, health problems, and social dysfunction. The Soviet government tried various approaches to limiting alcohol in Yakutia, all failures. The current approach is harm reduction and education, but on a dark February night when the temperature is minus 70 degrees Celsius and you haven't seen the sun properly in weeks, the appeal of a bottle is undeniable. You try kumis one evening, fermented mare's milk, a traditional Yakut beverage that's mildly alcoholic and deeply divisive. Some people love it, some find it revolting. It's sour, slightly fizzy, with a flavor profile that's somewhere between buttermilk and weak beer. Nutritionally, it's impressive: probiotics, vitamins, easily digestible proteins, and culturally, it's significant as one of the few traditional foods that's still widely consumed. You decide it's not terrible, which Sardana takes as high praise. Many outsiders cannot drink at all, she says. You have Yakut's stomach, maybe? The eating schedule is rigid because it has to be. Meals are timed around temperature cycles. Cooking during the warmest part of the day when opening doors and creating steam won't cause instant icing problems, and around work schedules. Missing a meal isn't like missing a meal in normal circumstances. It's depriving your body of fuel it desperately needs to maintain function. You notice that no one here practices intermittent fasting or dietary restriction. Everyone eats generously and frequently because survival requires it. Food preparation in these conditions is its own challenge. Water for cooking must be melted from ice or snow, which requires fuel and time. Ingredients are often frozen so solid they need careful thawing. Too fast and you damage texture, too slow and you're still hungry while dinner sits there like a brick. The stove serves triple duty: heating the home, cooking food, and providing hot water. It's the center of all domestic life, tended constantly, fed carefully, respected as the essential tool it is. There's no food delivery, no restaurants open late, no running to the corner store for a forgotten ingredient. The food you have is the food you have, and running out means going without until the next supply run, which might not be possible for days or weeks depending on weather and road conditions. This enforces a level of planning and discipline that's largely disappeared from modern urban food culture. Sardana keeps detailed inventories of stored food, calculating consumption rates against remaining winter duration, adjusting portion sizes if supplies are running lower than expected. You help prepare dinner one evening, carefully slicing frozen fish under Sardana's supervision, and you gain immense appreciation for the skill involved. The fish is so frozen that the knife can slip and cause serious injury if you're not careful. The slices need to be uniform thickness for even cooking. Everything has to be done quickly because frozen food exposed to room temperature starts accumulating surface frost immediately, and that frost interferes with cooking. It's like cooking on hard mode, where every step has additional complications. As you eat your dinner that evening, fish you prepared yourself, bread that's dense with calories, tea that's almost too hot to drink, you realize you're participating in a food culture that's simultaneously ancient and pragmatic, traditional and adaptive. This isn't farm-to-table cuisine or molecular gastronomy. This is survival food elevated to an art form through necessity and centuries of refinement. It's food that acknowledges the fundamental reality that in Yakutia, eating isn't about enjoyment first. It's about maintaining the metabolic furnace that keeps you alive in temperatures that should kill you. And honestly, the stroganina is growing on you. You reach for another curl of frozen fish, dip it in salt, and let it melt on your tongue while outside the temperature drops toward -75 degrees Celsius and inside the stove burns and the tea steams and life continues, one carefully planned meal at a time. By the end of your first week in Oymyakon, you're beginning to notice changes in your mental state that are subtle at first, then increasingly undeniable. The constant cold isn't just a physical challenge. It's a psychological siege that operates on multiple fronts simultaneously, and your brain is fighting battles you didn't know were possible. You wake up one morning and realize you've forgotten what warm feels like. Not intellectually, you remember the concept, but physically, viscerally. Your body's baseline has recalibrated to always slightly cold as the new normal. And this recalibration comes with mental adaptations that are both fascinating and unsettling. The darkness is the first psychological assault. You're at roughly 63 degrees north latitude, and in January you're getting maybe 4 hours of weak, slanted sunlight per day, and that's generous because sunlight suggests actual warmth and brightness, neither of which apply. What you actually get is a pale gray illumination that starts around 10 a.m., reaches its underwhelming peak around noon when the sun barely clears the horizon, and fades by 2:30 p.m. The rest, 20 hours of every day, is darkness. Complete, absolute, star-filled darkness. Your circadian rhythm, that ancient biological clock that's evolved over millions of years to respond to day-night cycles, is deeply confused. It keeps trying to trigger wake-up protocols during the long darkness, then sleep protocols during the brief light, And when you override these signals because you need to function on Yakutian time rather than biological time, the result is a constant low-level exhaustion that no amount of sleep seems to fix. You're sleeping 8, 9, sometimes 10 hours a night and waking up tired, groggy, feeling like you've been drugged. Sardana notices your fatigue and nods knowingly. Winter darkness sickness, she says, which is not a medical term, but everyone knows exactly what it means. Your body misses sun. We all have it every winter. Some people very bad, they sleep all day, cannot work, cannot function. Others just tired and sad. She's describing seasonal affective disorder, though she doesn't use that clinical terminology. Here it's just winter darkness sickness. And the treatment is endurance, artificial light when available, and the knowledge that it will end eventually. The village has installed some sad lamps in the community center, full-spectrum lights that approximate daylight, and you start spending an hour there each morning, sitting under the bright lights with a dozen other villagers, all of you silent and slightly desperate, trying to trick your brains into thinking the sun exists. It helps marginally. Some people swear by it. Others say it's useless. The scientific evidence is mixed, and historians still argue whether indigenous Arctic peoples suffered from seasonal depression to the same degree as modern populations, or whether industrialization and indoor lifestyles have made humans more dependent on natural light cycles. But the darkness is only one front in the psychological warfare. There's also the isolation. Oymyakon has about 500 residents, and in winter that population might as well be 50. People don't socialize casually when going outside requires 15 minutes of preparation and risks frostbite. There are no dinner parties, no dropping by a friend's house unannounced, no spontaneous gatherings. Social interaction is carefully planned, brief, and purposeful. You go to someone's house for a specific reason, you stay exactly as long as necessary, and you leave before you overstay your welcome or your heating bill. The result is a kind of atomization where each household becomes its own isolated unit, connected to others only through necessity and planned events. You can go days seeing only Mikhail, Sardana, and their children. The outside world, accessible through internet when it's working, which is maybe 60% of the time, feels increasingly unreal. You watch videos of people in California wearing t-shirts and shorts, and it triggers a kind of reverse culture shock. Those people exist in a different universe, one where temperature doesn't dominate every decision, every moment, every thought. The constant vigilance required for survival also extracts a psychological toll. You cannot relax, not completely, because relaxation means lowered awareness, and lowered awareness means death. You're always monitoring. How cold is it? How's the stove? Do I have enough fuel? Are my extremities warm? Is that a numb spot on my toe? What's the weather forecast? How much daylight is left? Every decision has potential survival implications, and while this becomes routine, it never becomes automatic in the way that breathing is automatic. It requires conscious mental effort all day, every day. Mikhail tells you about a neighbor who died 3 winters ago. Smart man, careful man, he says. But one night, very drunk, he decided to walk to his brother's house. Only 200 meters away, but temperature was minus 68 degrees Celsius. He got disoriented, went wrong direction. They found him next morning, frozen solid 50 meters from his own front door. The story isn't told as a horror story. It's told as a cautionary tale about the one moment of carelessness that's all it takes. We all know this can happen, Mikhail continues. So we always think before we act. It makes you tired, all this thinking. You start to understand the appeal of alcohol in this context. It quiets the constant vigilance, dulls the anxiety, provides temporary relief from the exhausting mental labor of survival. It's also why alcoholism is such a problem in Arctic communities. The short-term psychological benefits are real and immediate, while the long-term consequences are abstract and distant. You notice yourself thinking about that bottle of vodka in Mikhail's cabinet more often than you'd like. And you've only been here a week. Imagine months, years, decades of this. The children seem to handle it better, which makes sense from a developmental psychology perspective. For them, this is normal. They've never known anything different. You watch Mikhail's 8-year-old daughter, Akulina, playing with her dolls in a corner of the main room, completely unbothered by the fact that it's minus 72 degrees Celsius outside and dark at 3 p.m. Her brain developed in these conditions. They're not traumatic or exceptional to her, they're just reality. But you also notice she's quieter than most 8-year-olds you've known, more serious, less spontaneously playful. The environment shapes personality, and Yakutian children tend toward a certain stoic practicality that's adaptive here but might be called reserved or withdrawn elsewhere. The lack of privacy compounds everything. Living in close quarters is necessary for heat conservation and survival, but it means there's nowhere to go when you need solitude. Mikhail's house is essentially 3 rooms: the main room with the stove, a bedroom for parents, a bedroom for children, and everyone is always in the main room because that's where the heat is. You're constantly with people, constantly aware of their presence, their sounds, their moods. Sardana is stressed about dwindling flour supplies. Mikhail is worried about his car's transmission. The children are squabbling over a tablet. And you're in the middle of it all, unable to escape, unable to find a quiet moment alone because being alone means being cold. You start taking brief walks in the darkness, just to get some solitude, which Mikhail regards as mildly insane but tolerates. You bundle up completely and step outside into the minus 70 degrees Celsius night, walking a careful circuit around the house perimeter, and the silence is profound. No traffic sounds, no human voices, just the creak of your boots on snow so cold it squeaks like styrofoam, and your own breathing amplified inside the balaclava. It's peaceful in a way that's almost spiritual, and you understand why some people love the Arctic despite its hardships. There's a purity to the silence, the darkness, the cold. It's brutal, but it's honest. But you can only stay out for maybe 5 minutes before the cold penetrates even your careful layers and your body starts screaming warnings. Back inside, back to the crowded warmth, back to the constant low-level social stress of shared space. And you realize this is the cycle for months. Brief escapes into brutal solitude, then retreat to crowded warmth. Neither state is entirely comfortable, and the oscillation between them is its own form of stress. Sleep becomes weird. Your dreams are vivid, almost hallucinatory, possibly because your brain is processing the constant low-level stress and environmental extremity. You dream about warmth obsessively, beaches, deserts, tropical jungles, and wake up disappointed to find yourself still in Yakutia. Sometimes you dream about freezing, about the cold seeping through walls, about the stove dying, and you wake up in a panic, checking the temperature, feeding the fire even though it doesn't need feeding just because you need the reassurance. Sardana mentions that many long-term Yakutian residents develop what she calls cold paranoia, an obsessive, constant worry about heating, fuel, temperature, that goes beyond rational vigilance into genuine anxiety disorder territory. You see old people, they check stove 20 times per night, she says. They have enough fuel for 3 winters, but still they worry about running out. The cold gets into your mind, not just your body. There's also the strange phenomenon of temperature relativism. After a week at minus 70 degrees Celsius, a day that warms up to minus 45 degrees Celsius feels positively balmy. You catch yourself thinking, it's nice out today, when the temperature is still cold enough to cause frostbite in minutes. Your reference points have shifted so dramatically that your previous understanding of cold is meaningless. A temperature that would have terrified you a week ago now feels like a heat wave. This recalibration is necessary for psychological survival. If you maintained your original temperature standards, you'd be in a constant state of terror, but it's also deeply strange to observe happening in your own mind. The social dynamics of the village become clearer as you spend more time in the community. There's a strong culture of mutual aid and collective survival because individual survival is impossible. If your stove breaks, neighbors help repair it. If you run low on fuel, others share. If someone gets injured or sick, the community mobilizes. This isn't altruism. It's enlightened self-interest, because today it's their emergency, tomorrow it's yours, and the only way anyone survives is if everyone cooperates. But this forced cooperation also creates social pressures. Reputation matters intensely in a small community where you depend on others for survival. Being known as lazy, unreliable, or antisocial can have serious consequences. You're expected to contribute, to pull your weight, to participate in the collective effort. There's little room for individualism or eccentricity. The village enforces a kind of conformity through social pressure, And while this creates stability and predictability, it can also be stifling for anyone who doesn't fit the mold. You attend a village meeting one evening, a monthly gathering to discuss community issues, held in the heated community center. About 60 people show up, which is a significant portion of the adult population. The topics are intensely practical. Fuel deliveries are delayed due to road conditions. The school needs repairs before a crack becomes catastrophic. Someone's been dumping ash in the wrong place and creating a hazard. The discussions are direct, sometimes blunt to the point of harshness. There's no time for diplomatic niceties when you're discussing survival logistics. What strikes you is how everyone knows everyone's business. Privacy, in the urban sense, doesn't exist. Who's low on fuel? Who's having marriage problems? Who's drinking too much? Whose kid is struggling in school? It's all common knowledge, discussed openly or in barely concealed whispers. This transparency has advantages for collective survival but can be psychologically oppressive. There's nowhere to hide, no anonymity, no escape from community judgment. After the meeting, you talk with an older man named Boris who's lived in Oymyakon for 70 years, his entire life. People ask me, "How can you stand it?" He says, sipping tea in the community center's warmth. The cold, the darkness, the isolation. And I tell them, this is home. I know every person here, every house, every tree. In the city, you are alone among millions. Here, you are never alone. Is that better or worse? Depends on what you need. He pauses, considering. But I admit, sometimes in February, in the darkest time, I think about leaving. Everyone thinks about leaving. Then spring comes, the ice breaks, the sun returns, and you remember why you stay. You're starting to experience what he's describing. A kind of psychological siege where the cumulative effect of cold, darkness, isolation, and constant vigilance is greater than the sum of its parts. You're only a week in, and you're already feeling it. These people live like this for months, years, lifetimes. The mental toughness required is extraordinary, and you're gaining immense respect for everyone who chooses to stay, to build lives here, to raise children in conditions that should break the human spirit. Yet they haven't broken. They've adapted, creating psychological coping mechanisms passed down through generations. The dark humor you keep encountering, the jokes about freezing, about death, about the absurdity of living here, is one mechanism. The strong tea constantly available is another. The routine and structure, the rituals around the stove and meals and social gatherings provide anchors for mental health. The knowledge that it's temporary, that spring will come eventually, provides hope to hold on to during the darkest weeks. But you're also learning that some people don't adapt. Sardana mentions in passing that suicide rates in Yakutia are significantly higher than the Russian average, particularly among men in their 30s and 40s. The darkness, the isolation, the alcoholism, the lack of economic opportunities, they create a toxic psychological environment that some people can't survive. It's rarely discussed openly like many mental health topics, but it's there, an invisible casualty rate of living in extreme conditions. That night, lying in your bed under the mountain of furs, you take stock of your mental state. You're tired constantly. You're slightly depressed, though you can't tell how much is situational versus chemical. You're anxious about things that never worried you before: stove function, fuel supplies, temperature drops. You're craving sunlight, warmth, privacy, variety, stimulation. You miss casual comfort, thoughtless ease, the ability to just go outside without preparation. You miss being warm, but you're also experiencing something profound. You're learning what humans can endure, how adaptable we are, how much is possible when survival demands it. You're participating in a way of life that's existed for 1,000 years and will likely continue long after you leave. You're understanding, in your body and mind, what extreme environment living actually means. The cold presses in. The darkness surrounds you. Your mind oscillates between anxiety and wonder, between claustrophobia and appreciation. Outside, the stars will overhead in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human struggle. Inside, the fire burns, your breath creates frost patterns on the inside of your sleeping nook, and you drift towards sleep, dreaming of sunlight. while your psyche continues its silent adaptation to a world where merely existing requires extraordinary mental resilience every single day. The sound of children's laughter at -50 degrees Celsius is jarring in a way that's hard to describe. You're standing outside the school during what passes for morning recess, your face already aching from the cold despite being wrapped like a mummy, and 30 children are playing in the snow with apparent joy, not pretending to have fun, not grimly enduring, actually playing, shrieking, running, engaging in that universal chaos that defines childhood everywhere. Except here, every child is bundled so thoroughly they look like small, mobile Michelin men, and the temperature is cold enough that their parents would be arrested for child endangerment in most countries. The school's outdoor thermometer reads -48 degrees Celsius, which means recess is still permitted. The cutoff is -52 degrees Celsius, as Principal Natalia explained, and that number isn't arbitrary. It's based on decades of observation about when cold exposure transitions from character building to genuinely dangerous for children. Above -52 degrees Celsius, kids can be outside for 15-minute intervals with proper clothing and supervision. Below that threshold, the risk of frostbite becomes too high even for Yakutian standards of toughness. You watch a group of 7-year-olds playing something that resembles tag but with elaborate rules you don't understand. They're moving fast, which is essential. Standing still at these temperatures is dangerous even for adults, catastrophic for children whose smaller bodies lose heat more rapidly. One boy trips and falls face first into the snow, and your heart stops for a moment, but he bounces up immediately, laughing, snow coating his coat. His teacher, bundled just as thoroughly, watches carefully, counting minutes, monitoring for signs of cold stress. We learn to read the children. The teacher, a young woman named Olga, tells you. She has to shout slightly to be heard through both your balaclavas. The way they move tells us everything. Quick movements, running, playing, good, they are warm. Slow movements, standing still, hugging themselves, bad, they are getting cold. We watch constantly. She demonstrates the signs. Children unconsciously hunching their shoulders, tucking their hands under their armpits, stamping their feet more frequently than the game requires. We see these signs, we bring them inside immediately. No arguments, no 5 more minutes. Inside, warm up, check for frostbite. The children are wearing gear that's essentially miniature versions of adult extreme cold clothing. Multiple layers, oversized mittens attached to their coats with strings so they can't be lost, fur-lined hats with ear protection, heavy Valenki boots. Some of the younger children have small scarves wrapped around their faces in addition to balaclavas, creating multiple air-warming layers. It's equipment that costs real money. Money that many families struggle to afford, but it's non-negotiable. Inadequate clothing for a child isn't just uncomfortable. It's potentially fatal. Akulina, Mikhail's daughter, is among the players. You've been watching her adapt to school life, and she's clearly in her element here, chasing friends around the snow-packed playground with the confidence of someone who's never known fear of cold. When she briefly runs past you, you notice her cheeks are bright red but not white. Her breathing is strong and regular. Her movements are energized. She's fine, thriving even in conditions that would hospitalize children from temperate climates within minutes. The playground equipment is specially designed for extreme cold. No metal. Metal would cause instant frostbite on contact. So everything's made from treated wood or cold-resistant plastics. The swings have thick rope chains. The slide is positioned to minimize the time children spend sitting on cold surfaces. Even the snow they're playing in is different from normal snow. At these temperatures, it's dry and granular, almost like sand, too cold to pack into snowballs without warming it in your hands first, which some of the older kids are doing, creating a window of opportunity before the snowballs freeze solid. Do the children ever complain? You ask Olga during a brief lull. She laughs, the sound muffled but genuine. Complain about what? The cold? This is normal for them. They complain about homework, about not getting treats, about having to share toys. Same as children everywhere. The cold is just the cold. They know it exists. They know the rules. They know how to survive. What is there to complain about? She pauses, watching a cluster of girls engaged in some elaborate game involving drawing patterns in the snow. Now, children who move here from other places, from warm places, they complain. They cry, they refuse to go outside, they hate everything. for maybe 1 month, 2 months. Then they adapt. Children are very good at adapting. You think about that, the fundamental difference between children raised in these conditions versus those transplanted into them. The local children have literally never experienced comfort as a baseline. They don't know that being warm all the time is possible. Their nervous systems developed in these conditions, their expectations calibrated to this reality. It's not that they're tougher exactly, though they are. It's that their entire framework for understanding the world includes extreme cold as a non-negotiable constant, like gravity. One of the older boys, maybe 11 or 12, approaches you with the direct curiosity of a kid who spotted something unusual. "You are the visitor," he states in careful English. "From the warm place." "Yes," you confirm. "From a place where winter is maybe 0 degrees. His eyes widen. 0? You can be outside at 0 with no coat. The concept is clearly blowing his mind. "Well, you need a coat, but a light coat. Not like this." You gesture at your elaborate bundling. He processes this, and you can see him trying to imagine it. "That would be boring," he finally decides. "No challenge. Here, if you are stupid, you die. Makes life more interesting." He grins, you can see it in his eyes, the only part of his face visible, and runs off to rejoin his friends, leaving you standing there contemplating the fact that a 12-year-old just casually articulated a philosophy of environmental extremity as character development. Historians still argue whether raising children in such harsh conditions is a form of cultural resilience or borderline child endangerment. But watching these kids, it's hard to deny they're developing something valuable. They understand consequences in a way urban children often don't. They know viscerally that carelessness has real costs. They've internalized risk assessment and self-preservation at an age when kids in temperate climates are just learning to tie their shoes unsupervised. The recess bell rings, a loud, old-fashioned bell that carries clearly in the cold air, and the children immediately stop playing and line up by class, a discipline that speaks to serious training. They file inside through the vestibule system, and you follow, entering the warmth that feels almost oppressively hot after even 15 minutes outside. The children strip off their outer layers with practiced efficiency, hanging them on designated hooks where heat from the building will dry any accumulated frost. Teachers move among them, checking faces and hands for white patches that might indicate frostbite. One little girl, maybe 6 years old, has a small white spot on her cheek. The teacher spots it immediately, guides her to a warm sink, and carefully warms the area with lukewarm, not hot, water while explaining what happened. "You see? The spot got too cold. We warm it slowly, carefully. Does it hurt?" The girl shakes her head. "Good. It will be fine, but next time, tell me if your face feels strange." "Okay?" The girl nods seriously, learning the lesson that will potentially save her from serious injury in the future. Inside the classroom, you observe a lesson that's ostensibly about mathematics but is really about survival mathematics. The teacher poses a problem. If your family uses 20 kilograms of coal per day, and you have 400 kilograms stored, how many days before you run out? The children calculate 20 days, but then the teacher pushes further. Is 20 days enough? A discussion follows about planning margins, unexpected cold snaps, the need for reserves. These 8-year-olds are learning resource management through math problems, and they're engaged because it's not abstract. They've seen their parents doing these exact calculations at home. The curriculum in Yakutian schools includes explicit survival education that's integrated into every subject. Science classes study hypothermia, frostbite, the properties of ice and snow. Geography focuses on Arctic regions, climate patterns, understanding weather. Physical education includes cold weather hiking, proper layering techniques, building emergency shelters. Language classes read stories about traditional Yakut survival methods. It's not a separate wilderness survival elective. It's woven through everything because survival knowledge is as fundamental as literacy. During lunch, which is served in a warm cafeteria, you sit with a group of middle school students who pepper you with questions about life in warm places. They want to know if you can really swim outside, if plants grow all year, if you need heavy coats in winter. When you explain that sometimes winter in your region gets down to minus 10 degrees Celsius and people complain, they find this hilarious. -10? That is not even cold. one girl says, genuinely amused. That is spring temperature here. You ask them what they want to be when they grow up, expecting maybe answers that involve leaving Yakutia. But most plan to stay. Teacher, mechanic, nurse, police officer, all professions needed in the village. A few want to move to Yakutsk, the big city, but not to leave Yakutia entirely. Why would I leave? One boy asks, genuinely puzzled. This is home. My family is here. Yes, it is cold, but we know how to live with cold. In warm places, I would not know how to live. After lunch, you observe a younger class, 5- and 6-year-olds, during a lesson on getting dressed for outside. The teacher has a doll and full miniature winter clothing, and the children take turns dressing the doll correctly, narrating each step. First, the thin clothes to keep warm but not sweat. Then the thick clothes for cold. Then the coat zipped all the way. Then the hat covering ears completely. Then the mittens, not gloves. Mittens are warmer. Is presented as play, but it's deadly serious education. A child who doesn't learn this sequence correctly could die. The teacher notices you watching and explains. We start teaching this at age 3, 4 years old. By age 6, they can dress themselves completely without help. By age 8, they can identify signs of frostbite in themselves and others. By age 10, they can make survival decisions independently. We must teach this. Parents teach at home, we teach at school, everyone teaches. Because one mistake, one forgotten lesson, can kill a child. It's brutal but honest education. There's no sugarcoating, no shielding children from reality. They're taught explicitly and repeatedly that the environment is dangerous, that carelessness kills, that survival requires knowledge and vigilance. And somehow this doesn't traumatize them, it empowers them. They're not terrified of the cold. They're respectful of it, knowledgeable about it, confident in their ability to manage it. You watch Aquilina during an art class, drawing a picture of her house. She includes careful detail. The thick walls, the chimney with smoke, the small windows, the stilt foundation. When asked to explain her drawing, she points to each element. The walls are thick to keep warm. The chimney means the stove is burning. The windows are small because big windows let cold in. The house is on stilts so the permafrost doesn't melt. She's 8 years old and she understands building science better than most adults in temperate climates. The school's emergency protocols are rehearsed monthly. Children know that if the heating fails, they evacuate to the gymnasium, which has backup heating. If that fails, they evacuate to idling vehicles in the parking lot. If that fails, they evacuate to the nearest homes. They practice these drills until the procedures are automatic. Teachers carry emergency supplies in their classrooms, blankets, chemical hand warmers, high-calorie snacks, just in case. During afternoon recess, the temperature has warmed to -46 degrees Celsius, still permissible. You watch a group of older students building a snow shelter, a traditional Yakut survival skill. They're working with good humor and obvious expertise, hollowing out a drift, packing snow to create walls, leaving a small entrance hole. One boy explains, "If you are lost in cold, you make shelter like this. Get out of wind, body heat warms the inside, you can survive the night. Everyone must know this." He's maybe 13 and casually discussing overnight survival techniques that most adults elsewhere would never need. The social dynamics among the children are interesting. There's very little of the aggressive competition you sometimes see in schools elsewhere. Cooperation is valued highly, explicitly taught and reinforced, because competitive individualism doesn't work in an environment where survival depends on community. Bullying exists, kids are kids everywhere, but it's quickly shut down by both teachers and peers. A child who's mean to others, who doesn't share, who undermines the group, is socially isolated until they correct their behavior. The community cannot afford members who don't cooperate. As school ends and parents arrive to collect children, you notice the remarkable efficiency of the pickup process. No one lingers chatting. Children are bundled quickly, transferred from warm building to warm vehicle, driven home. Mikhail arrives for Aquilina, and the whole process, inside to outside to car, takes less than 90 seconds. Every second outside is a second of cold exposure, and it's minimized ruthlessly. On the drive home, Akulina chatters about her day, a minor conflict with a friend, a good grade on a test, excitement about an upcoming school event. She could be any 8-year-old anywhere, except that she's discussing these normal childhood concerns while casually existing in an environment that would kill unprepared adults within hours. The contrast is surreal. "Do you like school?" you ask her. She considers this seriously. "Yes, school is warm, there are friends, we learn important things. Sometimes I wish we could play outside longer, but I understand why we cannot. Too cold, too dangerous. Maybe in spring when it is warmer." By warmer, she means -30 degrees Celsius, which will feel like a heat wave after this. That evening, you reflect on what you've witnessed. These children are being raised in one of Earth's most hostile environments, and they're not just surviving, they're thriving, developing skills and knowledge and resilience that's increasingly rare in modern society. They understand risk and consequence, they value community and cooperation, they're self-reliant and competent in ways that would shame many adults from comfortable climates. But they're also children growing up in conditions that demand constant vigilance, that permit no carelessness, that require adult-level decision-making about survival from a young age. They're children who've never experienced the carefree negligence of a warm summer day, who don't know what it's like to play outside for hours without thinking about temperature. They're competent, capable, resilient, but you wonder what it costs them, what aspects of childhood are sacrificed to the demands of survival. Outside, the temperature drops as darkness falls. Inside, children across Oymyakon do homework, eat dinner, prepare for bed. They check the stove with their parents, lay out their clothing for tomorrow, set alarms for middle-of-the-night stove checks. They're children and they're survivors, and they're learning every day that life in extreme conditions isn't just possible. It's normal if you have the knowledge, the community, and the courage to face each frozen morning with the practical resilience that Yakutian childhood cultivates as naturally as breathing. It happens on day 10, during a morning when the temperature hits -76 degrees Celsius. A new personal record for cold you've experienced, and your body decides it's had enough of your nonsense. You're helping Mikhail carry fuel from the outdoor storage when you notice your right hand feels strange. Not cold, exactly, you're past distinguishing gradations of cold at this point, but distant, disconnected, like it belongs to someone else. You mention this casually to Mikhail, who immediately grabs your wrist and pulls off your outer mitten with urgent efficiency that suggests this is very much not casual. "How long has hand felt strange?" he demands, examining your exposed hand. Even through the inner liner glove, he can see what he's looking for. The tip of your index finger is waxy white, the skin firm to the touch in a way that healthy tissue should never be. Maybe 5 minutes? You guess, though time perception in extreme cold is unreliable. It just started feeling. Inside. Now. Mikhail's tone brooks no argument. He's already pulling you toward the house, abandoning the fuel pile, moving with the controlled urgency of someone who's dealt with this before. Sardana takes one look at your finger as you enter and immediately starts running water in the sink, testing the temperature carefully with her elbow. Not too hot, that's critical, apparently. You're experiencing second-degree frostbite, which Mikhail explains with clinical precision while Sardana prepares the water treatment. Cold has frozen the tissue, damaged cells, stopped blood flow. First degree is just surface, skin is white, but no blisters. Second degree means deeper damage. You will have blisters, maybe lose some skin, but probably keep the finger if we treat correctly now. The casual, probably keep the finger part makes your stomach drop. The rewarming process is genuinely one of the most painful experiences of your life. As your finger thaws in the lukewarm water, the pain escalates from uncomfortable to burning to absolutely excruciating as blood flow returns to damaged tissue. You're sweating, gritting your teeth, possibly making sounds that aren't quite screams but aren't far off. Mikhail watches the process with sympathy but doesn't let you remove your hand from the water. "Must be completely thawed," he insists. "Stop too early, tissue dies. This pain means blood is returning. Pain is good. Pain means finger might survive." After 20 agonizing minutes, your finger has progressed through the color spectrum from white to red to an alarming purple red. Sardana dries it carefully with sterile gauze. They keep medical supplies on hand because, of course they do, the nearest hospital is hours away and might be unreachable in extreme weather. A blister is already forming, filling with clear fluid, which apparently is expected and not as bad as if it were bloody fluid. Clear blister may be okay, Sardana says. Blood blister means very bad damage. She bandages the finger loosely, wrapping it in layers of gauze and soft cloth to protect it without cutting off circulation. Do not pop the blister, she instructs firmly. Let it heal naturally. Keep clean, change bandage daily, watch for infection. If finger turns black, smells bad, or you get fever, we must go to hospital immediately. No delay. The matter-of-fact way she discusses potential gangrene is almost more disturbing than the injury itself. How did this happen? You ask, still processing the pain and the fear and the sudden awareness of your own fragility. I was wearing proper gloves. I thought I was being careful. Mikhail examines your outer mitten and finds the problem immediately. A small tear in the inner liner, barely noticeable, maybe a centimeter long. See? Small hole, cold air gets in, creates cold spot. Cold spot at minus 76 degrees Celsius means frostbite very fast. This is why we check all gear constantly, repair immediately, replace if needed. Small damage, big consequences. He sets the damaged glove aside. You use my spare mittens now. No arguments. Mikhail shares his own history. 3 fingers on his left hand have reduced sensation from frostbite incidents over the years. His father lost 2 toes to gangrene after a severe frostbite case in the 1970s. Most adults in Oymyakon have at least one frostbite scar. Some story of tissue damage survived. It's almost a rite of passage, a mark of having lived here long enough to make that one mistake that the cold punishes. The thing people do not understand about cold. Mikhail says that evening over tea, your bandaged finger throbbing with each heartbeat, is that it is actively hostile, not just uncomfortable, not just dangerous in careless situations. Actively, constantly trying to kill you. Every second you are outside, heat is being stolen from your body. Your body fights back, makes heat, but at extreme temperatures you cannot make heat fast enough. You are always losing the battle. Question is only how fast. He's right. And you're experiencing it now with painful clarity. Your body is trying to heal your finger, but the healing is slow because even inside the warm house, your core temperature is probably a degree or 2 below normal. Your body is constantly diverting resources to maintaining critical organs and core temperature, which means healing is a lower priority. The blister on your finger is swelling, painful, a visible reminder of what happens when you drop your guard even briefly. The respiratory issues start around day 12. You wake up with a burning sensation in your chest, a dry cough that feels like you've been breathing sandpaper. When you mention it to Sardana, she nods knowingly. Cold air damage to lungs, she diagnoses. Very common, especially for visitors. You are breathing air that is sometimes minus 75 degrees Celsius. This air, even through balaclava, even warmed by breathing passages, damages the delicate tissue in lungs, creates inflammation, irritation, makes you cough. The treatment is limited. Stay inside as much as possible. Breathe through multiple layers of cloth when outside. Drink hot tea constantly to soothe the irritation. It will heal when winter ends, Sardana assures you. But for now, you must be careful. Too much damaged lung tissue, you can develop infections, pneumonia. Some people, they never fully recover. Lungs are damaged permanently, breathing problems for life. You're learning that cold injuries accumulate. It's not just one dramatic incident of frostbite or hypothermia, though those happen. It's the daily, constant minor damage that adds up. Lung tissue irritated by cold air, skin dried and cracked by low humidity, joints aching from constant cold stress. Minor frostbite incidents that heal but leave tissue slightly weakened and more vulnerable to future injury. Living in Yakutia means accepting that your body is in a constant state of low-level damage and repair, a war of attrition between human flesh and environmental extremity. Your face is a battlefield. The skin is constantly dry, cracking at the corners of your mouth and around your nostrils despite liberal application of protective creams. You've developed a painful split in your lower lip that reopens every time you eat or smile. Your nose bleeds occasionally from the extreme dryness. Humidity inside is maybe 15%, outside it's even lower, and your nasal passages are staging a protest. Mikhail shows you his hands, thick, calloused, the skin tough as leather from decades of cold exposure. Your skin will adapt if you stay long enough, he says. Becomes thicker, more resistant, but always there is damage. My hands hurt in winter, every winter, arthritis from years of cold. This is price of living here. He flexes his fingers, and you can see the slight stiffness, the way he favors certain movements. You meet an elderly woman, Tatiana, who's lived in Oymyakon for 78 years. Her hands are twisted with arthritis, her face deeply lined, her breathing labored. The cold gets into your bones eventually, she says in Russian, which Sardana translates. When you are young, you heal. When you are old, the damage stays. My fingers do not work well anymore. My knees hurt always. My lungs are weak. But I am still here, still alive. Many of my generation did not survive. She's matter-of-fact about it. No self-pity. Just stating the reality of a lifetime in extreme cold. Historians still argue whether the health costs of living in these conditions outweigh the cultural and economic benefits of maintaining settlements here. But talking to Tatiana, you understand that for many residents, the question isn't even relevant. This is home. They know the costs, they pay them willingly or unwillingly. And they stay because leaving would mean abandoning everything they know, everyone they love, the only life they've ever understood. The dental issues surprise you. On day 14, you notice increased tooth sensitivity, and when you mention it to Sardana, she grimaces sympathetically. Cold air makes teeth ache, she explains, especially if you have any small cavities or cracks. The temperature shock, breathing in -70 degrees Celsius air through your mouth, it causes pain, can even crack teeth if they are already weak. She schedules you an appointment with the village's visiting dentist, who comes from Yakutsk once a month during winter. The dentist, a weary-looking man named Dr. Petrov, examines your teeth and confirms. Minor temperature damage to the enamel? Nothing serious yet, but you need to be more careful about breathing through your nose only. I see this constantly in Yakutia, he says. Cold air is terrible for teeth. I fix more cold-damaged teeth here than cavities. He shows you x-rays of other patients. Teeth with visible cracks running through the enamel, damaged from years of temperature shock. Your fingers and toes are constantly on the edge of cold injury. Despite careful layering, despite proper gear, despite doing everything right, you're always just barely warm enough. Your body has adopted a permanent defensive posture. Blood flow restricted to extremities. Everything focused on core temperature maintenance. Your fingers are always slightly cold, slightly numb, and you've developed the Yakutian habit of constantly flexing them, wiggling toes, moving to maintain circulation. The psychological impact of constant physical stress compounds everything else. You're tired, always tired, because your body is working overtime just to stay alive. You're eating enormous amounts of food and still losing weight. Your immune system is probably compromised from the constant stress, making you vulnerable to infections. Every minor ailment becomes more serious in this environment because your body's resources are stretched thin. You develop a cold, just a regular cold virus, picked up from one of the children, and it hits you harder than any cold you've had in years. Fever, congestion, cough on top of your existing respiratory irritation, body aches. Sardana treats you with concern that seems disproportionate until she explains. Simple cold in Yakutia can become pneumonia very fast. Your lungs are already stressed from cold air. Your body is already working hard to stay warm. Add infection, and sometimes body cannot fight everything at once. People die from colds here, especially old people, young children, anyone weak. The treatment is aggressive. Stay inside completely, stay warm, drink hot liquids constantly, rest as much as possible. Mikhail feeds the stove more frequently, keeping the interior temperature several degrees warmer than normal despite the fuel cost. Sardana makes you drink cup after cup of hot tea mixed with honey and lemon, traditional remedies, but also medically sound for keeping you hydrated and soothing irritated tissues. You sleep for 12-14 hours a day, your body desperately trying to heal while also maintaining temperature. It takes a full week to recover, and even then you're weak, short of breath, easily exhausted. Your body has learned an important lesson, Mikhail observes. Yakutia does not forgive weakness. Sick people, injured people, old people, babies, they are vulnerable, must be protected carefully. This is why we watch children so closely, why we check on elderly neighbors daily. The margin between okay and critical is very small here. Your frostbitten finger is healing, slowly. The blister has burst, you didn't pop it, it went naturally, which Sardana says is good. And new skin is forming underneath, pink and tender and sensitive. You'll probably keep the finger, probably regain most sensation, but there's scar tissue forming that will always be a weak point, always more vulnerable to future cold injury. It's a permanent mark, a reminder of your mistake, a lesson literally written into your flesh. As you approach your third week in Oymyakon, you've accumulated a catalog of minor injuries and ailments. The frostbitten finger, respiratory irritation, cracked skin, the recovering cold, sore joints, constant fatigue. None of it individually life-threatening, but collectively exhausting. You look at yourself in the mirror and barely recognize the person staring back. Face weathered and lined, lips cracked, eyes tired, skin rough. You've aged visibly in 3 weeks. And yet, the locals carry injuries far worse with casual acceptance. Mikhail's reduced finger sensation, Tatiana's crippling arthritis, Dr. Petrov's cold-damaged teeth, the school teacher's chronic respiratory issues. Everyone here is walking wounded to some degree, carrying the accumulated damage of years or decades in extreme cold, and they just continue. Get up, tend the stove, go to work, raise children, live their lives despite bodies that are slowly breaking down under environmental assault. That night, your finger throbbing with phantom pain, your lungs still irritated from cold and infection, you finally understand viscerally what it means to live here. It's not an adventure, not a challenge to overcome. It's a grinding war of attrition where human flesh is matched against environmental extremity, and the environment never gets tired, never relents, never forgives mistakes. Your body is the battleground. Cold is the enemy, and the price of staying alive is measured in accumulated damage that will never fully heal. Outside, the temperature hits minus 78 degrees Celsius, the coldest yet. Inside, the stove burns. Your finger throbs. Your lungs ache, and you sleep, dreaming of warmth and health in bodies that aren't constantly fighting just to maintain basic function. While around you, the people of Yakutia endure another night of the same battle they've been fighting all their lives. On day 16, Mikhail announces it's time for you to learn the old ways. Not as historical curiosity, but as practical survival knowledge that might save your life if modern systems fail. You rely too much on house, on stove, on fuel deliveries, he observes. What happens if these things fail? You must know how our ancestors survived, how we still survive when modern conveniences break. He's arranged for you to spend the day with his uncle, Nikolai, who at 73 is one of the village elders and a repository of traditional Yakut knowledge that's been passed down through generations. Nikolai lives in a house that's notably more traditional than Mikhail's, smaller, older, with design elements that predate Soviet modernization. The walls are even thicker, constructed using ancient techniques involving layered bark, moss, and packed earth between wooden frames. Modern insulation is good, Nikolai says through Mikhail's translation, but our grandfathers built houses that lasted hundreds of years using only what nature provided. Their knowledge was tested across centuries. Modern materials have been tested for maybe 50 years. Which would you trust more? He shows you the traditional Yakut stove design, different from the Russian Burzwika, more compact, with a complex system of internal channels that extract maximum heat from minimum fuel. 1 log in this stove provides same heat as 3 logs in modern stove. Nikolai explains, demonstrating how the smoke path winds through brick channels, transferring heat efficiently before exiting. Our ancestors could not afford to waste fuel. They designed everything for maximum efficiency. This knowledge comes from survival necessity, not engineering textbooks. The reading of snow is your first lesson. Outside, bundled in your borrowed mittens, face wrapped carefully, Nikolai walks you through the winter landscape, pointing out details you've been walking past for weeks without understanding their significance. See here. He indicates a slight discoloration in the snow. This tells you the wind direction from last storm. See there, pointing to a subtle ripple pattern. This shows you where wind always flows. If you are lost, wind patterns guide you. Every snow pattern tells story about the land, the weather, the direction. He crouches, impressively flexible for 73, and shows you how to read snow depth and consistency. Soft powder snow here, good insulation for emergency shelter. Hard-packed snow there, dangerous for walking, might hide holes or weak ice. See this crystalline structure? This forms only at temperatures below -60 degrees Celsius. See this granular texture? This means brief warming, maybe -40 degrees Celsius. The snow tells you temperature history, wind history, everything you need to know. It's like he's reading a book written in frozen water, and you're illiterate. Traditional shelter construction is next. Nikolai demonstrates how to build an emergency shelter using only snow, not an igloo, which requires specific snow conditions, but a simpler drift shelter that can be carved from any large snowbank. Using a saw in his bare hands, protected by mittens so thick they're almost comical, he hollows out a space in a drift, creating a small cave barely large enough for one person curled in fetal position. Body heat in small space like this can raise inside temperature to maybe -20 degrees Celsius, even if outside is -70 degrees Celsius, he explains. 50 degrees of difference. Enough to survive the night if you are lost, if you cannot make it home. He shows you the critical details. The entrance must be lower than the sleeping platform, allowing cold air to settle while you sleep in warmer air above. The ceiling must be domed to prevent dripping if any melting occurs. The walls must be thick enough for insulation but not so thick they collapse. There should be a small ventilation hole in the roof, critical because sealed snow shelters can lead to carbon dioxide buildup or, if you're burning anything for heat, carbon monoxide poisoning. Every year, people die in snow shelters, Nikolai says gravely. Not from cold, from forgetting ventilation. Dead is dead. Does not matter if you froze or suffocated. Finding and creating fire in extreme cold requires different techniques than normal camping knowledge. Nikolai demonstrates using traditional Yakut materials. Birch bark for tinder. It contains oils that burn even when frozen, dry willow twigs for kindling, and small pieces of larch heartwood for fuel. Never use large wood first, he instructs. In extreme cold, big wood will not catch fire. Must start very small, build up slowly, be patient. He uses a traditional steel striker and flint, more reliable than matches, which can fail when wet or extremely cold, and within minutes has a small fire burning in a carefully prepared pit. The fire management is an art. Too much fuel too fast, and the fire smothers itself with unburned wood that's too cold to ignite. Too little fuel, and it dies before generating enough heat to sustain itself. Nikolai tends the fire with the focused attention of someone conducting a delicate experiment, adding twigs one at a time, waiting for each to fully catch before adding the next. Modern people want instant results, he observes. Throw gasoline on wood, make big fire immediately. In Yakutia, impatience kills you. Patient fire building is survival skill. Once the fire is established, he demonstrates traditional Yakut methods for maximizing heat efficiency. Rocks arranged around the fire absorb heat and radiate it long after the fire dies. A reflector made from bent birch bark directs heat toward where you're sitting or sleeping. The fire pit itself is dug into snow and lined with stones, creating thermal mass that holds heat. With these techniques, small fire keeps you warm for hours. Without these techniques, large fire still leaves you cold because heat escapes. Knowledge is more important than resources. Traditional clothing comes next, and Nikolai shows you his winter gear. A full set of Yakut winter dress that's probably 100 years old, maintained and repaired across generations. The base layer is thin reindeer hide with the fur against the skin, reversed from what you'd expect. Fur against body traps warmth better than fur facing out, he explains. Also, fur facing in does not accumulate frost from breath. Over this, thicker reindeer hide with fur facing out. Over that, a layer of thick felt. The total outfit weighs maybe 20 kilos and makes you look like a walking furry barrel, but according to Nikolai, it can keep you alive and functional in temperatures down to -80 degrees Celsius with no additional heat source. The boots, traditional Yakut boots called iturbii, are particularly impressive. Multiple layers, thin reindeer hide against the skin, thick fur lining, outer reindeer hide with fur facing out, and a separate removable inner booty that can be dried each night. Sweat is the enemy, Nikolai emphasizes. These boots allow moisture to escape through top opening, while fur still insulates. Modern rubber boots trap moisture. Feet get wet, wet feet freeze. Our ancestors understood moisture management better than modern bootmakers. Historians still argue whether indigenous Yakut technology was independently developed or adapted from other Arctic peoples like the Evenki or Chukchi, but regardless of origin, it represents sophisticated understanding of cold weather survival that's been refined through literally thousands of years of trial and error, with failures resulting in death. Every design element has purpose. Every technique has been tested against the ultimate standard. Does it keep you alive? Food procurement in traditional Yakutia required skills that are largely lost now. Nikolai explains ice fishing techniques, finding the right spots where fish gather in winter, cutting through meter-thick ice, using traditional lures carved from bone or horn. Fish in winter are sluggish, must be enticed carefully. Cannot just throw any bait and expect success. Must understand fish behavior in cold water, how they conserve energy, what attracts them. He shows you carved lures, beautiful in their simplicity, designs that have worked for centuries because they mimic the exact movements that trigger predatory response in winter fish. Hunting in extreme cold presents unique challenges. Animals are scarce. Most have migrated or are in hibernation, and those remaining are extremely wary and well adapted to cold. Traditional Yakut hunters use techniques based on deep understanding of animal behavior, knowing where reindeer dig for food, understanding how hares move in deep snow, reading tracks to determine how long ago an animal passed. Modern hunters have rifles, telescopic sights, GPS, Nikolai says. But if rifle freezes, if batteries die, they are helpless. Traditional hunter needs only knowledge, patience, and skill with bow or spear. The concept of reading the cold is perhaps the most subtle knowledge Nikolai shares. He teaches you to recognize the different qualities of cold. Yes, there are different qualities, something you wouldn't have believed before experiencing them. There's wet cold around -30 degrees Celsius to -40 degrees Celsius, when there's still some atmospheric moisture and breathing is relatively easy. There's dry cold, from -50 degrees Celsius to -65 degrees Celsius, when the air becomes desert dry and burns your lungs. And there's killing cold below -70 degrees Celsius when every breath is painful. Exposed skin freezes in seconds, and the cold has an almost physical presence, pressing against you like a malevolent entity. Our ancestors believed cold was a living spirit, Nikolai says. Not superstition, observation. Cold behaves like a living thing. It seeks weakness, finds gaps in your defenses, waits for you to make mistakes. It is patient, relentless, intelligent in its own way. So we treat it with respect, not as mere temperature but as a force that must be understood and negotiated with, not conquered. This animistic understanding of cold isn't primitive ignorance. It's a psychological framework that enforces the constant vigilance necessary for survival. He teaches you traditional weather prediction using only observation. The behavior of birds. Ravens flying low means incoming storm. Ravens absent means extreme cold approaching. The sound of ice, certain cracking patterns indicate temperature changes. The quality of smoke from fires, how it rises and disperses reveals air pressure and coming weather. The color of the sky at sunset, particular shades of orange and pink, predict specific temperature ranges for the next day. Meteorology with satellites is good, Nikolai acknowledges, but satellites sometimes fail. Your eyes never fail if you know how to see. Traditional medicine in extreme cold is limited but surprisingly effective for what it addresses. Nikolai shows you preparations of various herbs and barks collected in summer, dried and stored, used to treat frostbite, respiratory issues, and stomach problems. Willow bark for pain and fever. It contains salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin, though Nikolai doesn't know the chemistry, only that it works. Birch leaf tea for respiratory inflammation. Reindeer fat mixed with certain herbs for treating frostbitten skin. Modern medicine is powerful, he says, but takes time to reach us, sometimes is not available. Traditional medicine uses what is here, what grows here, what we can collect ourselves. The concept of seasonal time is explained, the traditional Yakut understanding of time that's based on environmental conditions rather than clocks. Winter is divided into periods: darkness time, when sun barely appears; deepest cold time around late January and early February; breaking cold time, when temperatures begin to moderate slightly; melting time, when spring approaches. Each period has specific activities, specific dangers, specific survival strategies. Clock says February is same as January, but they are completely different in survival terms. Clock time is artificial. Seasonal time is real. Social survival strategies are equally important as physical techniques. Nikolai explains the traditional mutual aid systems, how families would check on each other daily during extreme cold, how food was shared when some had surplus and others were short, how child-rearing was communal because survival required many adults watching and teaching. Modern people think survival is individual, one person with skills against nature. False. In Yakutia, survival is always collective. Alone, you die. Together, you live. This is why community is sacred, why reputation matters, why we teach children to cooperate above compete. As the day ends and you prepare to return to Mikhail's house, Nikolai offers final wisdom. You came here to learn about surviving extreme cold, but surviving is not same as living. Surviving is just not dying. Living is understanding that cold is part of the world, not enemy to be defeated but reality to be accepted and adapted to. Our ancestors lived here for thousands of years not by conquering cold but by learning to exist with it, to find life within it. This is the real knowledge, not techniques but philosophy. Accept what cannot be changed. Adapt what can be adapted. Endure what must be endured. That night, back in Mikhail's house, you think about the day's lessons. The technical knowledge, shelter building, fire starting, clothing design, is impressive and potentially life-saving. But the deeper lesson is about the accumulated wisdom of cultures that have survived in extreme conditions for millennia. This isn't primitive knowledge superseded by modernity. It's sophisticated understanding that's often more reliable than modern technology because it's been tested across centuries and refined through natural selection where failure meant death. You're beginning to understand that Yakutian survival isn't about any single technique or piece of equipment. It's about a comprehensive cultural system of knowledge, skills, attitudes, and social structures, all evolved specifically for extreme cold. Remove any single element and the system becomes less effective. The traditional knowledge and modern technology work best when combined, each covering the weaknesses of the other. Outside, the temperature is minus 73 degrees Celsius. Inside, the stove burns with wood and coal. But now you also know that if the modern system fails, if fuel runs out, if the stove breaks, if you're lost in the wilderness, there are ancient techniques that could keep you alive, passed down through generations, tested by 10,000 Yakutian winters, refined by the harsh teacher of survival where mistakes are punished with death and successes are rewarded with another day of life in the coldest inhabited place on Earth. It's your final night in Oymyakon, and as you prepare for sleep, you're acutely aware that this nightly ritual, the one you've performed 24 times now, carries a weight you didn't fully understand when you arrived. The sun set hours ago at its typical depressing 3:30 p.m., and now at 11 p.m., you're lying in your familiar nest of furs and blankets, listening to the house creak and settle around you, and contemplating the fact that going to sleep here is fundamentally different from going to sleep anywhere else you've ever been. In normal places, sleep is restoration, escape, a period of unconsciousness where the world continues without your participation and you rejoin it refreshed in the morning. In Yakutia, sleep is a calculated risk. Every night when you close your eyes, you're placing enormous trust in systems that could fail. The stove must keep burning, the fuel must last, the chimney must draw properly, the walls must hold their integrity. No crack can open that would let killing cold pour in. You're trusting that you'll wake up at your designated alarm times to check the stove. You're trusting that your body will alert you if something goes catastrophically wrong. You're trusting that tomorrow morning you'll still be alive. Mikhail has just completed his 10 p.m. stove check, the ritual you've watched and participated in dozens of times now. The fire is loaded with coal, dampers adjusted precisely, the brick mass of the stove radiating stored heat that will carry through the night if everything goes according to plan. The outdoor thermometer reads -74 degrees Celsius, and the forecast suggests it might drop to -77 degrees Celsius around 4 a.m., that cruel hour when temperatures reach their nadir and human bodies, even sleeping ones, are most vulnerable. The midnight alarm is set on your phone, which is tucked close to your body because batteries die in the cold. The backup alarm, a traditional wind-up clock that Sardana insists on because technology fails, sits on the small table beside your bed, ticking with mechanical reliability. In 4 hours, you'll drag yourself from warmth, check the stove, add fuel if needed, assess the temperature, make the judgment call about whether everything is stable or whether action is required. Then back to sleep for another 4-hour shift until the 4 a.m. check. This interrupted sleep pattern has become your normal, though it never becomes easy. Your circadian rhythm has adapted as much as it can, but you still wake from the midnight alarm feeling drugged and disoriented, consciousness arriving slowly while your body screams to stay in the warm cocoon. You've learned that hesitation is dangerous. The longer you delay getting up, the more likely you'll fall back asleep and miss the critical stove check. So you've developed a routine. Alarm sounds, count to 3, throw off blankets, feet to floor, stand up before your brain can argue. The shock of cold air on your face is better than any coffee. Sardana has explained the overnight dangers with her characteristic bluntness. If stove fire dies completely, house temperature drops maybe 1 degree every 10 minutes. In 3 hours, interior is below freezing. In 6 hours, everything is frozen, water pipes burst, food freezes solid, and you, she paused meaningfully, you might not wake up. Hypothermia in sleep is peaceful, they say. You just slip away, get colder and colder, your body slows down, and then you do not wake up. She wasn't trying to scare you. She was stating the reality that every Yakutian knows and lives with every winter night. There have been deaths. Mikhail told you about a family 3 winters ago in a neighboring village. A fuel delivery was delayed. Their stockpile ran out, and they tried to stretch their last coal through one more night. The father stayed up trying to nurse the failing fire, but eventually exhausted, he slept. The fire died. The temperature dropped. All 4 family members, parents and 2 young children, were found frozen in their beds. The community doesn't speak of it often, but everyone knows the story. Everyone learns the lesson. Never, ever compromise on fuel reserves or stove vigilance. The mechanical systems you're trusting tonight are simple but not infallible. The stove itself, brick and iron, basically medieval technology, is reliable but requires constant feeding. The chimney must draw properly, which depends on temperature differential and can be affected by extreme cold or wind. The fuel must be dry and of good quality. Damp coal or frozen wood won't burn efficiently. The air dampers must be adjusted correctly. Too much air and fuel burns too fast. Too little and the fire smothers. It's an analog system requiring human judgment, and human judgment is impaired by exhaustion, by darkness, by the seductive warmth of bed calling you back before you've properly assessed the situation. Your body position in bed is deliberate. You've learned to sleep curled in on yourself, minimizing surface area exposed to air. Your head is buried under blankets, creating a small breathing pocket that's warmer than the ambient room temperature. This creates its own problem. The moisture from your breath freezes on the inside of the blankets, creating a frost layer that accumulates through the night. By morning, the blankets near your face will be stiff with ice, and you'll need to carefully extract yourself from what's essentially a frost cocoon. The temperature in your bedroom right now is probably around 12 degrees Celsius, cold enough to be uncomfortable, but not immediately dangerous. The main room, closer to the stove, is maintaining maybe 18 degrees Celsius. The differential makes sense. Heat radiates from the stove outward, dissipating with distance, and your bedroom is intentionally positioned at the edge of the heated zone to conserve fuel. Heating the entire house to comfortable temperature throughout would be impossibly expensive. So you have a warm core, the main room, and progressively cooler peripheral zones. You sleep in the periphery, protected by mass quantities of blankets and the residual warmth bleeding through the wall from the main stove. Outside, the village is dark and mostly silent. A few lights are visible from windows, other families maintaining their own stove vigils, living their own version of this nightly routine. Somewhere in the distance, you can hear a dog barking, one of the hardy Yakut huskies that can sleep outside even in these temperatures, though most owners bring them into heated sheds when it drops below -70 degrees Celsius because even adapted animals have limits. The occasional vehicle drives past, engine running continuously, someone making an essential trip because only emergencies justify driving at this temperature. You think about the fact that across Oymyakon tonight, 500 people are engaging in this same ritual. Loading stoves, setting alarms, bundling into bed, placing their lives in the hands of heating systems and their own vigilance. Some are better prepared than others, more fuel, better stoves, newer houses. Some are more vulnerable, elderly people living alone, families with young children, anyone sick or injured. The village operates as an informal mutual surveillance system. Neighbors check on each other, especially the vulnerable, because collective survival depends on no one being forgotten. The statistics aren't comforting. Across Yakutia, deaths from cold-related causes, hypothermia, accidents caused by cold, health failures triggered by cold stress, are significantly higher than in temperate regions. Some deaths are dramatic. People caught outside in sudden cold snaps, heating failures, vehicles breaking down in remote areas. But many are quiet, solitary. An elderly person whose stove fails in the night, a drunk who fell asleep outside, a child who wandered out inadequately dressed. The cold is an indiscriminate killer, and winter maintains a steady mortality rate that's accepted as the price of living here. Your mind drifts to the thought experiment that's been haunting you for days. What if you woke up and the fire was dead? Not dying, dead. Cold stove, cold house, temperature already dropping. What would you do? The answer, which you've rehearsed mentally, is assess quickly, don't panic, get dressed in all available clothing immediately, attempt to restart the fire using emergency kindling and methods Nikolai taught you, and if that fails, make your way to a neighbor's house before hypothermia sets in. The critical window is probably 30 to 60 minutes from discovering the dead fire to losing the ability to function from cold. After that, decision-making becomes impaired, motor skills deteriorate, and survival becomes increasingly unlikely. But what if it's 3 a.m. and you're alone because Mikhail's family has traveled somewhere? What if the temperature is -80 degrees Celsius and going outside, even to reach the next house, is nearly suicidal? What if your emergency fire starting fails because your hands are already too cold to work properly? These scenarios play out in your imagination like horror films, each one ending with you curled in bed, getting colder, consciousness fading, the sleep that never ends. Sardana has told you about the psychological adaptation required to sleep peacefully despite these risks. You cannot think about it every night, she said. If you lie awake worrying, you never sleep, and exhaustion makes you careless, and carelessness kills you. So you do the checks properly, you prepare correctly, and then you trust and sleep. What else can you do? Live in fear forever? That is not living. It's a forced acceptance of risk, a psychological necessity for maintaining sanity while living somewhere that genuinely is trying to kill you 24 hours a day. The indigenous Yakut people developed cultural practices around sleep that acknowledge its dangers. Traditional blessings spoken before bed ask spirits to protect the sleeper through the night. Certain rituals, checking that children are properly covered, ensuring elderly family members have adequate blankets, are performed with religious consistency. The community shares stories of miraculous survivals and cautionary tales of deaths, all reinforcing the message. Sleep is serious, night is dangerous, vigilance saves lives. Your breathing is slowing, consciousness beginning to fragment in that familiar way that precedes sleep. Your body is warm under the furs, the weight of the blankets creating a comforting pressure. From the main room, you can hear the faint crackle of the stove, the occasional shift of settling coal, the soft sounds that mean the fire is healthy and burning well. These sounds are reassuring, the auditory confirmation that the system protecting your life is functioning. You've set out your clothing for the midnight check, positioned so you can dress in darkness without searching. Thick socks, heavy sweater, the flashlight within arm's reach. You've done this check 24 times now. The routine is established, the movements nearly automatic. Wake, dress, check stove, add fuel if needed, return to bed. 10 minutes total, maybe 15 if adjustments are needed. A small price for another 4 hours of sleep, another step toward morning, another night survived. The wind is picking up outside, You can hear it starting to howl around the corners of the house, that distinctive high-pitched sound that extreme cold wind makes. Wind is dangerous. It increases heat loss from the house, creates drafts that can extinguish flames or lower efficiency. Mikhail will have accounted for this in his stove loading, adding extra fuel, adjusting dampers to compensate. The man is a virtuoso of heat management, and you're trusting his expertise tonight, as you have every night. Historians still argue whether humans should even attempt to live in conditions this extreme, whether settlements like Oymyakon represent admirable resilience or tragic stubbornness. But lying here, about to sleep in temperatures that could kill you if systems fail, you understand that the question misses the point. People are here. They've been here for centuries. They've developed the knowledge and practices to survive. The moral judgment about whether they should be here is irrelevant compared to the practical reality that they are here, and they endure. Your thoughts become less linear, dreams beginning to intrude on waking consciousness. You remember the warmth of summer, though you haven't experienced summer in Yakutia, just Mikhail's descriptions of brief intense heat, mosquitoes, the permafrost softening enough to cause foundation problems. You dream about beaches, tropical heat, sweating instead of shivering. Your subconscious is processing months of cold stress through fantasies of warmth. But there's also strange comfort in this routine now. The ritual of the stove checks, the weight of the blankets, the sounds of the house settling, the knowledge that across the village others are maintaining the same vigil. It creates a sense of shared purpose, of participating in collective survival. You're not alone in this nightly gamble. 500 people are making the same bet. That preparation and vigilance will see them through to morning, that the systems will hold, that tomorrow they'll wake to face another day. The last conscious thought before sleep finally claims you is a kind of gratitude. Gratitude for the house and its thick walls, for the stove and its stored heat, for Mikhail and Sardana's knowledge and generosity, for the accumulated wisdom of generations who learned to survive here. Gratitude that you're warm, relatively safe, protected by layers of technology and tradition and community from the killing cold outside. Your breathing deepens, your muscles relax, your consciousness fragments and disperses. Sleep comes, not the easy sleep of safety but the guarded sleep of someone who must wake in 4 hours to check the fire, the vigilant sleep of survival, the sleep that in Oymyakon is never quite complete because part of your mind stays alert, monitoring, ready to wake if something goes wrong, ready to fight for survival even in unconsciousness. Outside, the temperature continues its inexorable drop toward -77 degrees Celsius. The stars will overhead in their ancient patterns. The wind howls. The cold presses against walls and windows, seeking weakness, patient and relentless. Inside, fires burn in stoves across the village. Alarms are set. Bodies curl under blankets. And 500 people sleep the complicated sleep of those who know that tomorrow morning is not guaranteed, that waking is a small victory, that survival is measured in these nightly intervals of trust and preparation and hope. The house creaks. The fire crackles. Your breathing slows to the rhythm of deep sleep. In 4 hours, the alarm will sound, and you'll wake to check the stove, to ensure the fire still burns, to confirm that you've survived another night in the coldest inhabited place on Earth. And in the morning, if morning comes, if you wake, if the cold hasn't won, you'll do it all again. Because this is life in Yakutia, where falling asleep is an act of faith, where waking up is never quite certain, where every sunrise is a small miracle earned through vigilance and preparation and the stubborn human refusal to surrender even to conditions that should, by all rights, make human existence impossible. The darkness outside is absolute now, complete, the kind of darkness that feels almost solid. Your mind drifts on the edge of sleep, held in that peaceful space between waking and dreaming. The weight of the blankets presses down like a gentle hand, reassuring, protective. The stove in the next room continues its quiet work, radiating warmth through the wall, keeping the cold at bay for another night. Your body relaxes completely, trusting in the systems, in the knowledge, in the routine that has kept you alive and warm for 24 nights now. Tomorrow you'll leave Oymyakon, return to the world of easy warmth and casual comfort, where sleep is simple and unguarded. But tonight, for this final night, you're here, participating in this ancient ritual of survival, sleeping the sleep of the Arctic, where rest is never quite complete, where vigilance never fully stops, where waking tomorrow is a gift earned through preparation and care and the accumulated wisdom of generations who learned to survive where survival should be impossible. The cold presses, the fire burns, the village sleeps its vigilant sleep, and you, wrapped in furs and blankets and the protective embrace of knowledge and community, drift deeper into rest, trusting that when morning comes, you'll wake to face one more day in this extraordinary place, this testament to human resilience, this village at the edge of what's survivable. Sweet dreams, traveler. May your fire burn strong. May your alarms wake you. May tomorrow's sunrise find you safe and warm. May you remember, always, that sleep in extreme places is never simple, that survival is never guaranteed, that every morning is a victory worth celebrating. Rest now. The stove will keep burning. The walls will keep standing. The cold will wait outside, patient and eternal. But tonight you are safe, you are warm, you are alive. Sleep well, and may you wake to greet another frozen dawn in Oymyakon, the coldest home on Earth.